All right, guys, welcome in. So moments from now, we expect to see Zelensky arriving to meet with Trump at the White House. This, of course, comes after Friday's Alaska Peace Summit with Putin. And I think the big question on everyone's mind is, what exactly is going to happen? Is this going to be a round two situation? Round one there obviously being, you know, what we're all referring to. Well, we'll talk about that in today's stream. Zelensky is set to arrive at about 1 p.m. Just moments ago, we saw the European delegation that he basically, this is at least what the liberal media is saying about it, but maybe there could be some truth in it, that Zelensky has essentially dragged along with him to ensure he doesn't get bullied this time around. Although I have to say, given the complete lack of actual support besides the virtue signaling that the European Union and many of America's NATO partners have given to the war, I remain skeptical of all of that. But that said, we'll get into it as we await Zelensky arriving to the White House. Couple of questions. So first of all, is he going to be mature this time? Is he going to actually operate in reality, as I've been saying before? Because thus far, at least pre-February, that was not the case. Now, it does seem like, there's a little bit of a change in the shift in rhetoric in terms of Zelensky not so much arguing for ridiculous things like pre-2014 borders just over the weekend. Trump told him, look, you're not going to get Crimea. That's not even the subject of this war that started in 2022 in particular. What on earth are you talking about? You see now more of a shift to those security guarantees. I've long been of the opinion, in order to get a peace summit, or peace settlement, I should say, you're going to basically reach this agreement where Putin is more so going to be the guy who gets the territory and Ukraine can get those security guarantees. If they're both going to be stuck here fighting over territory, especially given it's Eastern Europe, I don't think you're really going to get anywhere in that direction. But that said, we'll get into it, guys. Before we begin today's stream, do us a favor as usual. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. If you're finding us for the first time, feel free to subscribe and feel free throughout the show to super chat your thoughts with comments, questions you have, or you just want to support the show. All right, let's get into it. So that said, just minutes ago here, we saw Zelensky have a meeting at a DC hotel with Trump's special envoy. I think this is Kellogg, General Kellogg, if I'm not mistaken there. And it's been a big question, first of all, in terms of, will Zelensky wear the suit? Now, sources have said that he's going to be wearing at least a blazer or suit jacket, considering he's going to meet with the president. This is the guy, despite all of the rhetoric, who is trying to actually save his country. And a lot of people are buzzing about the fact that apparently, thus far, all he's shown up in here is a t-shirt. Now, a lot of left-wingers try to make the argument that, oh, he's fighting a war, therefore he can't change. But it's like, okay, if he's so busy, he can't change on the plane. It's worth noting, this has always been an intentional design choice of Zelensky to basically communicate to the world. Like, it's very Hollywood-esque, right? Very indicative of the fact that he was also on Vogue magazine, that kind of attitude of like, oh, I'm going to communicate to people that I'm at a war by showing up in military fatigues, even though I'm nowhere close to the front lines. Nonetheless, here was minutes ago Zelensky and Trump's special envoy. Take a listen.
How are you, sir? Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Hi, good to see you. Great. How are you?
Mr. President, thank you very much for your time. I know your time is busy.
A little bit.
What I wanted to do just briefly was to, I've got a meeting with the President, the Vice President, and the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State this morning.
Thank you so much. So first of all, we are thankful to the President for this invitation and the format of what we will have. It's important signals about security guarantees, and that's why it's important that we are together with the United States and Europe, and the President accepted the common meeting also after our bilateral common meeting with the Europeans. And so I'm so grateful that such big countries as UK, Finland, and the President von der Leyen, the Secretary Rutte, that they will come. And I think this will be an important meeting, and we will speak about the architecture. I think so. We will have time to speak about architecture of security guarantees. And this is what really I think the most important.
Good.
Yes, I hope so. We will speak together. We will begin, of course, bilaterally, but I think mostly we can speak about it when we will be together, sitting together, and then
I think it's good.
So there you have it. I find it funny, by the way. His entire delegation, besides the one guy who I'm guessing is actually a general or something, wearing an actual army uniform, not just like a costume, essentially. Everyone else is dressed in dress clothes, and then you have Mr. President here in a t-shirt. So, you know, that kind of displays a lot about this character. But that said, I do find it to be interesting as we go in here. I think there's a live feed. Let me tune into it really quickly. I think people are just sitting around there waiting. But the rhetoric of Zelensky as of late, if you've noticed, and this is my grounds for optimism, which let's all be honest, we're dealing with Zelensky here. Not exactly a character to be trusted, not exactly the most reasonable guy as we've seen thus far when it came to negotiating. We all remember how he created a massive scene in front of the American media back in February, but the way in which now you notice where he didn't say anything about territory, right? He didn't say, oh, we want our land back. He didn't make any mention this time around how, oh, we're like a sovereign country being invaded, all of this. Now the focus mainly is on just saying, look, we want security guarantees for Ukraine. And what I'm betting on here, or at least what I'm hoping if we do manage to see that, is essentially if he's going to give up this delusion that he's going to somehow retake his pre-2014 or even pre-2022 borders, then you could get closer to having some type of deal, right? Because thus far he's operated in this framework where he's the one losing the territory. And by the way, the longer this war goes, we saw over the summer, Russia make more and more territorial gains, that none of this is working necessarily in his favor, as Trump told him, right? You don't have the cards. Only with America do you even remotely have some degree of leverage. And what the best, I guess, peace deal you could get is essentially, as I said in the beginning, yeah, you're going to have Russia basically take the territory that it's taken, because, you know, people can say, oh, that's so terrible, they were the invaders. Okay, fine, but what's the alternative, right? The alternative is, oh, we keep fighting the war. Okay, fine. Now, if Ukraine could keep fighting the war and have some type of expectation they were going to retake the land they already lost, then maybe there would be an argument there. But we obviously know that's not the case, right? It's just pure math, by the way. There's a reason why Russia struggled in the beginning of the war, but now they're beginning to inch forward because just look to history if you need an example. That's the best place where Russia excels, right? Manpower, attrition. And so I think it's been the case, frankly, that, you know, the push for peace probably should have started about 1 to 2 years ago, if not from the very beginning of the war. But obviously, we know the Biden agenda. We know the agenda, frankly, of our entire political establishment, the war lobby in Washington, was, well, you know, just keep throwing guys to the front lines because I guess supposedly we're helping Ukraine, but in reality, we're actually kind of destroying Ukraine in the process. We're leaving them without really people or a country left to have, but I don't know if it somehow stands up to Vladimir Putin, then that could be the agenda. So that'll be interesting to see. Now, that said, I think the other interesting question will be, what is the role? Why are these EU leaders actually here? It's interesting that Trump, I don't know if it's a graciousness or gratitude thing or whatever for coming to the White House, but Trump basically told Zelensky that you can bring any EU leaders you want. And so worth noting, the European delegation here is handpicked by Zelensky. So I think we'll know very rapidly whether, you know, we're going to get more seriously closer to an actual peace here or not, right? Because if it does end up being round 2, if you do see another scene where, you know, you remember what happened, then that probably indicates, well, Zelensky hasn't changed much. The EU standpoint probably hasn't changed much, and they want to just keep on surrendering people to the line and fighting till the end of time, and it is what it is. But that said, you know, I think the fact, first of all, that this summer Russia has made territorial gains might be a piece of leverage, perhaps, that, you know, Ukraine is now looking at and saying, well, finally we're realizing the inevitable, right? We're realizing the longer this goes, the better it is for Russia, actually, despite the narrative that you keep hearing out of the media and out of DC that, oh, Trump is surrendering to Russia. No, it's in Ukraine's best interest right now to make peace. The longer that it goes, the more Russia is going to walk away with, and who knows what the end result ends up being from that. The more Ukraine will be damaged. It's just utterly ludicrous, but, you know, there you have it on one front. So that said, guys, it is currently 12:52 p.m. Eastern time. We are awaiting. Let me briefly check out what's going on here in our live chat. At this point, if the guy says no, everyone just take the country. Well, that's going to be what happens, right? Maybe not the whole country, but again, it's just pure math, right? You know, okay, and you know, in total fairness to the Ukrainians, they put up a really good fight. They put up a fight, I think, for much longer than people were expecting, right? The first month of the war, when Russia was moving on the capital, it seemed like, you know, the obvious foregone conclusion, which was much like the Georgia campaign back in 2008, much like even Crimea, although that was not actively done with blood. You know, it's Russia, right? They're going to bowl over everyone. They put up a good fight. You know, they've managed to not lose their whole country. But at a certain point, you have to understand, okay, now we have to accept the deal, right? Same thing, arguably, Finland had to deal with in World War II when they were trying to fight back against the Russians, right? You put up a noble fight, you know, credit to them for doing so. But they, in the end, still kind of made a deal, ceded something, because they understood, right? You're not going to defeat the massive power over time, considering you're just tiny little Ukraine. So we'll see what happens there, right? Now, on the Russian side, apparently at the Alaska summit over the weekend, they expressed some willingness to have these so-called security guarantees for Ukraine. I'm curious as to what that's going to look like. Right? Because if we have, you know, obviously, actually, I should pull this up on the screen right now. Trump is reiterating, and it seems pretty obvious, it should seem, that Ukraine joining NATO is not realistic. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. But that said, right, what do those security guarantees look like? Of course, Keir Starmer out of the UK has floated the idea of keeping like European peacekeeping troops on the ground in Ukraine, or at least the western part of Ukraine. At the same time, one could argue, well, that's NATO troops in Ukraine. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what the solution is there. But here's what Trump said. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. That's, of course, exactly what I've been saying. Remember how it started. No getting back Obama given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired. Obviously, that's not happening. And no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change. Moments ago, we also saw, here's the European delegation arriving at the White House, so let's tune in here.
Pause just for one moment our discussion as we see now which EU leader has arrived to the White House. That's Rutte right there that we see. And let's just stand by and wait a moment as we watch.
I don't even know who that is, for the record. If someone in the chat can help me with this. So the Europeans have arrived in their hybrid electric vehicles, and we're ready for their insightful opinions on everything. Squishy actually asked a really good question in the chat. You think the EU leaders will want peace? Well, thus far, they haven't, right? It's so interesting. They're so obsessed with this. They say America's giving up on the fight. We need to defend Ukraine till the very end. This is World War II all over again. But they don't actually put up the money, right? They don't put up the money. They don't put up the aid. It's marginal, obviously, compared. And even when you break that, because the argument is GDP, right? Oh, America has a bigger economy. Obviously, they can give more money. No, even when you break it down by GDP, it's interesting. The major EU powers, that being Germany and France, I think respectively give 0.4% and 0.2% of their respective GDP thus far to aiding Ukraine. The United States gives 0.6%. So the fact that, despite the fact that we're the larger economy, despite the fact that this war impacts us the least of those nations, we give more proportionally, even weighted for the money we have, right, to the war. And actually, the European countries who have given the most of their GDP are completely random, not random, no insult, but smaller powers in the EU, like Denmark. I think Denmark and Sweden have given like 1%, right? Big numbers. But this is all to say that while it might not be the case that the Europeans, at least in rhetoric, want peace, I think hopefully, in contrast to what you saw in February, you're now reaching the point where both Zelensky and the EU realize they're basically out of options, you know, because they've tried to do a lot. If you remember, this is kind of what I thought was the breaking point. So back in February, you had Zelensky getting run out of the White House. I remember this clearly. That was on a Friday, if I'm not mistaken, right? The very next day, it seemed like it was all planned out. Frankly, I would argue that the EU might have influenced even Zelensky's behavior in the White House. He goes to the UK the next day, if you guys remember this. He meets with Keir Starmer of the UK. He meets with many of the EU leaders. It's basically a delegation. And the talk at the time, whether you watch the Munich summit and all this different stuff, there was a theory that Europe was pushing, which is, hey, we're going to do our own form of NATO, right? Basically, if America's going to retreat in this war, we'll keep fighting. But after that summit, on Saturday, right after 24 hours after Zelensky met with Trump, there basically seemed to be a consensus that, we can't do this without the United States, right? Because despite all their talk, despite the fact they're the biggest loudmouths, they don't have the money to put up, right? I don't know. They're too busy spending it on, like I said, hybrid electric vehicles or something. So as a result, the very next day on Sunday, guess what happened? Remember this? Zelensky finally apologized to Trump. It's a very interesting timeline. Because on Friday night, when he did the interview with Bret Baier, if you remember, he said, oh, it was tense or whatever, but he wouldn't say sorry. Only after he went to the EU, realized they're dirt poor broke and they can't actually do anything to help, then he apologizes. So that's my hope here is basically, again, all sides have accepted reality. Zelensky has accepted the reality that he's not going to win this war the longer it goes, first of all. And of course, secondly, he is not going to get the help from the EU. And the EU further accepts reality, saying, okay, despite our talk, we're not going to be able to help Ukraine. And screaming at the United States, given the current leadership of the United States, is not going to help. It's only going to hurt that situation. So that's what ultimately we're going to have to find out, right? We'll be very interested to see. And it's also, I think, an interesting question in terms of, well, is European peacekeeping troops, which is the idea floated thus far in Ukraine, going to be acceptable to Putin? Now, you could make the argument, this is the argument I might make, given the current circumstances, that when you look at the way the EU has treated this war thus far, you know, maybe it ought to be argued that, well, is European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine really much of that much of a threat to Russia, right? That's what I would say to Putin. I would say, look, they're pathetic. They've been a joke this whole war. You know, it's almost performative. It'll do something. It'll give Ukrainians peace of mind. But you understand, this is not like placing American troops on your border because we are not the same, right? We are not equal in this regard. So I don't know. Maybe perhaps that's the reason why Putin allegedly signaled over the weekend in Alaska that he would be willing to open the idea of a security guarantee. I don't know if that means boots on the ground or not, but that's going to be interesting, right? I think at the same time, the idea floated mainly out of the U.S. is, well, if we do a rare earth minerals agreement with Ukraine and we're buying them and they're investing in all that, then we would have a vested interest in Ukraine. So that would kind of, you know, make it harder for Russia to invade. It'd give the U.S. more of an interest in that region, and it would also actively benefit the U.S. instead of us giving out our military for free. So that's another interesting idea. You may remember back to about March that there was all this back and forth over that rare earth minerals agreement. You know, Zelensky said he didn't sign it. He was not going to sign it. And then he did sign it. And then he didn't sign it. And then I think in the end, he finally did sign it. So, you know, that just gives you an idea of the seriousness we're dealing with here. So that said, Michael Scott says that Europe should sign the agreement to protect Ukraine, not NATO. No USA involvement or promises to protect is not our problem. Well, I think that's the idea currently being pushed right now, is that the Europeans are going to be responsible for the defense and the peacekeeping, not America. The issue I see with that is, well, when it comes to Russia, are they going to buy the argument that that's not NATO, right? Hey, all the NATO countries, basically besides America, like the powerful major ones, are involved, but America's not. Therefore, everything is fine. Well, however, if you get a war in that region, and let's say the German troops are fighting the Russian troops, that sounds familiar. But in that case, right, a NATO country's at war, technically by the NATO Defense Pact, the U.S. is supposed to go and get involved there on behalf of Germany. So can you find a loophole around that? How do you justify that? That's what I'm kind of curious there to find out. Or maybe you keep a level of European troops in Ukraine if that's what they want to do. to not really be able to muster a full defense, but have just enough where it's kind of like acceptable and it's sort of a deterrence, but it's not serious. I don't know. That's going to be a pretty interesting detail I think they have to iron out, besides the territory. It all starts, though, that Zelensky has to be realistic and accept we're going to lose some territory, right? The current lines of control are basically going to have to be frozen, and then we can discuss the security guarantees. So there's two hoops, frankly, they have to jump over to get here. So, Trump and Marco Rubio and others have essentially said here, well, we're going to find out very soon if this is feasible or not, because there is absolutely a timeline in which both sides here decide they just want to keep fighting. Now, if you're Russia right now, and I think the scene you've seen thus far, and the reason why they said they will accept a final agreement to end the war, but they don't want a ceasefire, is they're in no rush to stop the fighting because, despite whatever losses they may be taking, they're winning, right? They're actively taking more territory, and they understand, well, if the war goes on until 2029, we'll make out that fine. We'll be probably having more territory. It's Ukraine that's really going to be in the difficult situation. So, again, despite the narrative here about the selling out to Russia, no, this peace deal really benefits Ukraine. It benefits Ukraine the most. Obviously, it benefits the human cost of the war, which is arguably the most important. And I'm not saying that Russia has no vested interest in wanting to, stop the fighting or stop the bloodshed. But ultimately, this is about Ukraine. We are actually trying to help them in a serious way. Not the Biden way of like, oh, let's just, have you, send old men to the front lines and destroy your country and destroy your population. No, we're trying to save Ukraine here, literally, in a very interesting roundabout kind of way. The question is, will they accept that? I don't know. That's what we have to sit here and wait and find out, as apparently moments from now, it is 1:03 p.m. Eastern time. Zelensky is set to arrive here. Allegedly, he's going to put on a suit jacket. We'll see. So there you go. Robert Lynn Schultz says, not our circus, not our monkeys. Well, I wish that was the case, but it is kind of our circus in a way, considering we gave so much military funding to this war, but I definitely understand the sentiment you're expressing there, for sure. Let's see what else we got going on here in the live chat. It needs to be the U.S. security, and NATO and other European countries should pay us. Well, the thing is that Russia will not, and it's not in their interest to accept American troops on the ground defending Ukraine in a peacekeeping deal. Nor should our troops, frankly, be there, right? This war affects Europe more. They seem to be the ones most passionate about it, by the way, right? I remember it was just a couple months ago where Macron was screaming at us out of France. He was like, the United States is acting totally unacceptable. Keir Starmer, very interesting because he is a leftist. He's elected from the Labour Party, but has a huge obsession here with war, right? He's totally always talking about Ukraine this, Ukraine that. Then they should be the ones that defend Ukraine if peacekeeping ends up being the outcome here, So Pinoy Joe says, where can you find info about who is actually getting territory or the number of troops killed? Well, it's kind of hard to figure out casualties, I think, in the war because, interestingly, there's not a lot of frontline videos or documentation of what is happening. I think the American stat is Russia's lost 300,000 people or something. But as for territory being gained, I don't know. I look at it, well, if Western and Eastern media are saying the same thing, then it's probably true. And it is the case that over the summer, you have seen Russia make some territorial gains. They took a couple more villages, basically, right? Inching slowly. But we understand if this goes on for many more years, it's not going to be a favorable position for Ukraine. Even if we keep sending them arms, by the way, where are they going to get the manpower? They're currently dragging people to the front lines, old people to the front lines, right? And I don't know if the outcome that the war lobby wants or Ukraine wants or the EU people want, whatever it is, in the end, what happens when Ukraine runs out of manpower? At that point, do you have to send NATO troops to the line, or are you going to finally admit the inevitable? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it. So it benefits both sides to downplay their casualties. I mean, that's certainly true. Yeah. At the same time, it benefits the U.S. to upplay the casualties, at least American media. So, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I think what's undeniable is that people have died, and it's a war that should stop, for sure. It should not be our mission to either put American lives at risk to protect the European Union anymore, especially since they lack the spine to do it themselves. No, absolutely. I think that's a geopolitical rift you're seeing in the world right now. Because very interestingly, I believe it was this year, Emmanuel Macron of France was asked, and people should remember this, right? Because we always get told about our sacred allies, our unbreakable allies. Guys, we fought World War II together, so that means it'll last forever, because that's how it works, right? Anything in history, those alliances last forever. They're definitely not pragmatic. They're definitely not like cynical things based on common interest. But, oh, we have shared interests. What's the shared interest? Democracy, because the EU is so democratic, right? But it's very interesting, because they asked Macron, because obviously America's main strategic priority or adversary, whatever word, that our focus right now is not so much Russia, it's China, right? Main rival of the United States. It's interesting to note the European Union is not going along with that, right? They're fully on board. They're, still very friendly with China, all that. But they asked Emmanuel Macron, if the US and China got in a conflict, would France back the US? And he kind of gave this wishy-washy answer, but essentially what he said was, well, we don't necessarily have a reason to, because we have no problem with China. Oh, but when you guys have a problem with Russia, we're supposed to come and back you. Well, that's very interesting, right? So keep that in mind. Right? People talk about the sacredness of NATO or why it's so important. Well, you have top NATO leaders, right? France, besides the US, is one of the top countries in NATO, that being France and Germany, right? That's kind of, the main in the UK, those are the main military powers that would fight with us. Maybe you could trust on the UK to come help us because, they're, of all the European allies, they're probably the best one. But keep that in mind. You had a NATO leader basically saying that if we got into some conflict with China, he can't guarantee they'd come help. Oh, but when Ukraine is the issue, which is way more important to Europe than America, obviously America is expected to come in and do the EU's work for it. That relationship has to stop, and I think you're already starting to see the seeds of that being broken. When we say that Trump is a transformational president, oh, the camera's zooming out. Is something here happening? Anyways, when we say that Trump is a transformational president, we don't just talk about domestic policy or the civil service, right? The government bureaucracy. He's rewriting the world order right now as we speak. And, people are calling him crazy in the moment, whatever, how dare he do this? But 10, 20 years from now, you'll see the effect. Because he's basically confirming the inevitable trends that you've seen, which is post-Cold War, post-1991, America and Europe's strategic interests does not really align so much anymore, right? A lot of people say NATO is an outdated institution. It should be defunded, abolished, whatever. I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to point out to you the realistic situation you see. France and Germany, compared to the US, don't really have the same interests anymore. And that's the case with a lot of that part of the world, right? They believe their top adversary is Russia. We're more so that our top adversary is China, right? They believe the Ukraine war is the biggest problem in the world. We believe a potential Taiwan war might be the problem with the world. How do you make those two things work together? And I think what you're seeing right now is as America shifts its strategic priority away from Western Europe and towards Asia, that the old alliances of the Cold War are not going to be around forever, right? And these vague slogans, by the way, of like, oh, but that's Western democracy. You'll rapidly find out that type of stuff is not enough to hold up an alliance, right? Because at the end of the day, like it or not, everything doesn't really come down to so-called shared principles. It comes down to power, shared interests, right? Everything is practical. And I mean, a lot of Americans have this idea that's not the case. No, it is the case. It is the case. You can't just use democracy alone to unite people on the basis of foreign policy. It doesn't really work that way. So that said, let's see. Enclave Leader for $5. Thank you very much. Says here that last time both sides agreed, Zelensky tried to blank Putin. A drone attack after his chopper fails. Another city is on fire. Hope peace works out. Yeah, well, I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he did that when Trump was in power, right? When was that Putin helicopter issue? But anyways, thank you very much for the 5. I, too, hope that peace works very much. Is Zelensky being fashionably late? That appears to be the case. It's going to show up to... Oh, we're seeing flags being raised. Okay, I think something's happening. All right, here we go.
Well, as he said it, I've been at a speech that he said that at, and that's something...
I'm going to guess this means imminently he's expected to arrive.
For this country to continue
But who knows?
to be free and to
Who
continue
knows?
past President Trump to be great.
Wonder if Zelensky wears a suit.
Have these-
Well, again, sources have said, so he's not wearing the green this time, which is interesting.
It's not
Allegedly, he's going to be wearing the typical, like, tech bro millennial outfit of the black t-shirt and the blazer,
all of it,
which I guess is better, right? It's better.
this is
It's still not really what we're asking for, but I find it hilarious. Again, this argument that he can't put on a suit because he's too busy fighting the war. You look at the video out of the DC hotel, his whole delegation besides him, besides the one general who's in an actual military uniform, not a costume, they're all wearing suits and ties.
so this is quite
But the president of the country, you know, he's got to wear the costume. You know, he thinks it's Halloween or something. I don't know.
We'll see Vladimir Zelensky.
Europe is a continent that is dying all by its own hand.
We'll have about
Yeah, it's sad.
maybe
It's
5,
definitely sad to
10
watch.
minutes, maybe 15 at the most, where we'll see the next live feed.
So let's
inside
see
the
here.
Oval Office between,
I guess he's still not arrived. All right. 12 minutes. I mean, 12 minutes late is not bad. It could be a Secret Service thing, but who knows? Maybe Zelensky's in the bathroom doing certain things that you're not supposed to do in the bathroom. But you know, I don't know. Allegedly, allegedly. Let's see what else we got going on here in the chat. It was May 2025. Okay, yeah. All right, so that's I think I remember that. There's a lot of news in the world. Sometimes I definitely forget things. But all right. So, here we are, guys. Still waiting. We do have a Marco Rubio CBS interview to play. Oh, here he is. Nope. Okay, we don't have to play that. All right, here we
a
go.
pro-life person that was out there.
We are starting to see there is the car. It has a Ukrainian flag on it. I'm going to guess that's Zelensky. Here you go. Let me go full screen, actually.
President Trump, sir, your message to the people of Ukraine as world leaders gather here today. Russia continues to attack civilians this time in Kharkiv, killing many.
Is there a just officer peace on the table? Will you
All right, so there you go. That's the greeting. So what's next will be them in the Oval Office, part 2. Buckle your seatbelt.
Okay, there you go. So our sources were correct. He is putting on a blazer. And is that a tie? I couldn't really see. Now, he does, I gotta say, he looks kind of like a security guard or, you know, maybe a waiter at a fancy restaurant or something. But, you know, it's an upgrade, all right? Progress. Look, what did we say in Alaska? We made progress. Now Zelensky has a suit on. Who knows? That's also progress. You know, we're making strides here. One really has to speculate here, too, by the way, that, well, when the war is over, what's he going to wear? Is he going to have to go back to wearing the suit, or is he just addicted to, you know, the costume play? I don't know. But there you saw the greeting outside the door. Now we momentarily wait. I'm going to guess, knowing how these things usually go, there should be an early press conference in the Oval Office, then they'll meet, and then they'll do the joint speech/press conference in the ballroom. But who knows? This could be a very quick meeting if it goes like the first time. I'm going to hope that's not the case, because as entertaining as it would be, it'd probably be a strong signal that we aren't going to get anywhere closer to the peace deal, and that would basically rip up all the talks. Now, that said, I would be highly surprised if Zelensky tries to pull that. You know, he's already invited the European delegation here to come with him and all that. But maybe you could make the case that, well, this is their master plan. If they want to keep on sabotaging, if they want to keep on playing funny games, then maybe the whole EU is here to, you know, basically tell Trump to go F himself, and then they leave. Now, again, we've seen that behavior thus far. The big question I have and the big kind of problem I see with that theory is, well, and the alternative is obviously what? Right? What are they going to do? They don't have the money to fight this war. It's ridiculous. So anyways, he wore his suit, very optimistic now. Yeah, like I said, we're making, hey, maybe by the final peace deal, maybe by the trilateral summit, he'll actually have like a normal suit on, you know? But, you know, look, some progress is certainly better than no progress. So there you have it. All right, that said, while we await the meeting and such, we do have, I guess, a little more to talk about here. Because first of all, I guess Zelensky did listen to the billboards out of D.C., because as you can see here, this is what he was greeted with outside certain areas of the district. Someone put up an amazing billboard here that says, "Wear a suit, bro." And, well, he showed up in the t-shirt to meet with the envoy, but apparently he's changed ever since. So we see stuff certainly working here. And let's see. So no news out of there. So that said, today I also want to react to this interview you might have seen yesterday out of Marco Rubio and CBS's, who is this, Margaret Brennan? And Margaret Brennan, who tries to grill him on this central question of, well, why are you surrendering to Russia? Why are you all so bad? You'll watch here rapidly as the reality check comes, because objectively, the way Trump is handling all of this is very smart, right? He, first of all, has not given too many details out to the public in terms of what they talked about at Alaska. Why? Because right now he has to tell that to Ukraine and Zelensky and NATO and the EU and see if they agree to it, right? Now, as for the question of why did you greet him on the red carpet? Why did you smile? Why did you shake his hand? You know, that's kind of like a basic prerequisite of diplomacy. You know, as I said, what did you expect him to do? You want him to, Putin comes down and you give him the middle finger, or you start like chucking food at him or something, you throw tomatoes. Is that going to actually change anything? So, and by the way, as for the question of why are you surrendering so much to Russia? Well, we're not actually. That's why a final agreement was not made. But nonetheless, let's take a listen here, because this got pretty entertaining.
You know, there's concern from the Europeans that President Zelensky is going to be bullied into signing something away. That's why you have these European leaders coming as backup tomorrow. Can you?
No, it isn't. That's not why they're coming as back. That's not true. No, but that's not why. That's not true. They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're not.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. We're going to have to cut from that. I believe we now see Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office, if I'm not mistaken. All right, yeah, here you go. Let's tune in.
I'll go with the president of Russia.
Go back
through everything. Go to Miss Gordon. Little give it from Biden. There's a piece.
All right.
Not too long. In between us.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have the president of Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the president of Russia, and I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it, and today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you, and using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine. She gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want
it. Yeah. So we're saying this sensitive topic. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners, and that you supported this format. That after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us: UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean, all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them, and thank you very much for invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump.
Do you think it's fair?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelensky, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelensky here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be. Look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
President Zelensky, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. That today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners, and we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Mr. President,
that's not really an answer.
Yes, if the peace deal will be achieved, are you going to be willing to send American peacekeepers to Ukraine?
Well, we're going to work with Ukraine. We're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long term. This is very long term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia. We're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of help when it comes to security. There's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe, but we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended. It was, I've done 6 wars. I've ended 6 wars, and I thought this maybe would be the easiest one, and it's not the easiest one. It's a tough one. A lot of reasons for it, and they'll be talking about it for a long time. But they'll be talking about the others. Look, India, Pakistan. We're talking about big places. When you look at, you just take a look at some of these wars. You go to Africa and take a look at that. Rwanda and the Congo, Republic of the Congo. That's been going on for 31 years. And so we've done a total of 6, and we really have 6, not including the fact that we obliterated, and it turned out to be a total obliteration, the nuclear, as you said, the future nuclear capability of Iran. And this one, I think we're going to get solved also. I feel confident we're going to get it solved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you tell us about your conversations with European leaders and what they need to see to support an end to the war?
Yeah, well, we're going to be meeting with a great representative group and 7 very powerful, very big countries, and great people, all friends of mine and friends of yours. And we're going to have some suggestions made. They want to see peace. They would like to see peace.
President Trump, you said last
in the
night
red, in the red.
President Trump, do you think it's fair to, for Ukraine and for Russia to achieve a lasting and durable peace if Ukraine cedes its territories that Russia hasn't yet conquered? Do you think it's a fair peace for Ukraine?
We're going to have a lasting peace. Just to answer the first part of your question, we're going to have a lasting peace. I hope it's going to be immediately. I hope it doesn't have to go on. And I think people of the whole world is going to be very happy when that's announced.
Mr. President, you posted on social media, Mr. President, a very touching letter from the First Lady. And the letter was hand-delivered to President Putin. And it calls for an end to the war, essentially, because of the children and the children's future. Why did the First Lady feel that letter was necessary? Was it because she believes that Mr. Putin is the aggressor in the war? Is a similar letter being hand-delivered to President Zelensky?
So the First Lady felt very strongly. She's watched the same thing that you watch and that I watch. I see things that you don't get to see, and it's horrible. But when she's got a great love of children, she has a wonderful son that she loves, probably more than anybody, including me. I hate to say it, but she loves her son. She loves children, and she hates to see something like this happening. And that goes for other wars too. I mean, she sees the heartbreak, the parents, the funerals that you see on television. Always funerals. We want to see something other than funerals. No, she felt. It was a beautiful letter. It was very well received by him. And she did ask me to say, you know, she would love to see this end. She would love to see it end. And she says it very openly, very proudly, and with great sorrow because so many people have been killed.
Mr. President, last week,
Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, it's good.
I said the one that attacked you last time. See, now I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
Maybe yours is much better. Real quickly, upon peace, God willing we get peace, are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, maybe, how to say, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, in the sea, yeah, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake
news like this idea?
Yeah. Speaking of news, I got a question for you. This sounds insane for me even to ask this, but do you think the American media really doesn't even want a peace deal because they've seen they've been so critical of you every step of the way as you lead the charge for peace?
It's an amazing phenomenon. I said that if in the settlement you got Moscow, St. Petersburg, and thousands of miles around them, they would say I made a bad deal. The level of hatred and animosity is incredible. Not with all. I mean, we have great people up here. We also have terrible people up there that I think are told what to say. But, you know, in solving all of these wars, they don't even write about it. You know, I saw major wars. I saw wars that have been going on for 31, 35, and 37, and a couple of quicker ones. One that was going to go into a full-blown deal very quickly. You know what the one I'm talking about. It was a big one. But they don't even write about that. No matter what I do, no matter what, and you know, this is not anything to do with you. It's probably to your advantage in a certain way. But no matter what I do, no matter what deal I make, from my standpoint, you'll come out good. Maybe President Putin will come out good. But they'll say, Trump was absolutely horrible. It's just that, and I've lived with that for a long time. I've lived with it since just before the first election. I used to get great publicity. Now I get the worst publicity anyone's ever gotten in office, but I won in a landslide, so that people understand. They're the only ones that count, ultimately. But I've also had great reporters. I've had journalists that are very good. But it's very sad when you do the right thing. As an example, they said, because of the fact that Vladimir Putin came to American soil, this was a tremendous defeat for Donald Trump. No,
so stupid.
It was really wonderful that he did it. It was a hard thing for him to do, to be honest with you. It was the opposite of what they said, but they said it. Now, if he didn't come, they'd say that was also bad for Trump. You know, there's no way. And there's just a great dishonesty of the press, and I think that's why it's lost its credibility. You know, its credibility is at an all-time low. We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now people, friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you, it's safe. I had another friend of mine. He has a son who's a great golfer. He's on tour, and he came in fourth yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says, he's a dictator, he's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time. Thank you.
I walked around yesterday with MTG. If you can walk around with D.C. with MTG and not be attacked, the city is safe.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week you warned of what you called severe consequences if a 30-day ceasefire or any type of ceasefire were not agreed to by Russia. Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because of
I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept. You know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
Are you President Zelensky, can you explain the decision to offer Ukraine Article 5 like security guarantees, but stop short of pushing for their full membership?
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything on that yet. If you look back and you go back long before President Putin, it was always a statement that they would never allow Ukraine into NATO. So that was a statement that was made, but we haven't discussed any of that yet. We're going to be discussing it today, but we will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of it. And the people that are waiting for us, they are, I think they're very like-minded. They want to help out all.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Trump.
Are you disappointed there's no ceasefire, Mr. President?
The United States has already given hundreds of billions of dollars to this war effort in Ukraine. At best, it is a stalemate, and the killing continues. So, President Trump, How much more is the United States willing to give Ukraine? And President Zelensky, how much more do you want?
Well, I'll start off just by saying we're not giving anything now. We're selling weapons. This is something before, I guess the number is well over $300 billion. That was under Joe Biden, a corrupt politician, not a smart man, never was. By the way, go back 40 years. He was not a smart man 40 years ago either. But now he's in particular bad. This was done by a corrupt administration that shouldn't have been in, and frankly, if the right results of the election were given, if I were president, this war would have never taken place, and he would have been very happy because he would have liked to have seen. I mean, they went through hell. He went through hell. This war would have never happened, and the people that were killed, a couple of million people, a lot of people with soldiers and everything else, and the people that have been displaced and forced into other areas and other countries because of what's happened, none of that would have happened. And I'm just saying that he was a horrible president, whether it was the borders or this. He was just a horrible, corrupt president.
Mr. President,
you want to
I can. Thank you so much. So first of all, we have possibility now to buy weapon from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this. And through NATO program, for example, Pearl, and etc. We have some programs where we can have some money to finance this, and this is a part, I think, it's not a part for the war and to defend us. It also will be a part for security guarantees, to strengthen our army, to rearm Ukrainian army. This is very, very important, and it depends how much money we need to rearm. For example, the question of air defense, we spoke about it with President Trump, and I'm happy that we have now bilateral decisions and we work on it with production, American production. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example. We need it very much, and this is also about defending.
I think the good news, we make the best military equipment in the world by far. You mentioned the Patriots. How good are they?
Systems.
We have systems. They're literally 100% foolproof, and it's really like shooting two bullets. You know, two bullets hitting each other in the air in a space like this. The chance is 100%. It's 99 to 100%. So we sell the equipment to NATO. And NATO does what, I don't know what the arrangement is that you have with, but I know that they want you to have the equipment. And we're getting the best equipment in the world, but they pay us for the equipment. Under Biden, it was just crazy what was going on. I believe the number is over 300. I think it could be $350 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And we've made more progress in settling this war in the last 2 months than they made in 4 years. This should have been settled a long time ago, but it should have never happened. Yeah, please.
Real quickly, you pushed out on social media.
Brian, go first.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well, that's a very off-topic, just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want change are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, You will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it, because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime. They're fighting me on the fact that I've made Washington, D.C. safe. We're not going to get mugged, beaten up, or killed like all the people you've been watching get so badly hurt. I'm glad. I hate to take your time with this, but I'm glad you asked me that question. Sorry. We're going to stop mail-in ballots because it's corrupt. You know, when you go to a voting booth and you do it the right way and you go to a state that runs it properly, you go in. They even ask me. They asked me for my license plate, for identity. I said, I don't know if I have it. They said, sir, you have to have it. I was very impressed, actually. But it's very hard to cheat with mail-in voting. As you know what happens in California, it's so corrupt, where some people get 5, 6, 7 ballots delivered to them. Now, we got to stop mail-in voting, and the Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me. And the Republicans have to get smart. We're not going to have a country. I said for a long time at rallies, you need borders and you need free and fair elections. Those two things. Otherwise, you don't have. We have strong borders now. In 90 days, Mr. President, we didn't have 1, 0, 0, and 3 months. Not one person came in illegally into our country. In fact, even I find that hard to believe, but it's run by a little bit of a liberal group that put out the numbers, so I guess it's, but 0, 0, and 0. You go back a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 millions of people poured into our country. It was terrible. Thank you very much.
What security guarantees do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes two parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And Mr. President, are you willing to commit American troops to that NATO-like protection in order to get President Zelensky to a deal today?
Well, I don't know if you define it that way, but NATO-like, I mean, we're going to give, we have people waiting in another room right now. They're all here from Europe, biggest people in Europe, and they want to give protection. They feel very strongly about it, and we'll help them out with that. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to get the deal done.
You've been involved with the peacekeeping in Ukraine since your first day in the administration. What would you say to the Ukrainian people right now who are suffering under the Russian attacks and hoping that the American people will stand with them?
Well, I know Ukrainian people. I've known many over the years. They're great people. They're smart. They're energetic. They love their country. I mean, they love their country, and we want to get this war ended. That's all I can do. I love the Ukrainian people, but I love all people. I love the Russian people. I love them all. I want to get the war stopped. Very important.
Mr. President, was there any aspect of your discussion with Vladimir Putin that left you disappointed?
Look, we just spoke to, I was just telling the president, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much,
Okay, well, there you saw the opening little press conference questionnaire between Trump and Zelensky. Worth noting, the attitude seems a lot different from last time, does it not? Actually, I'm not even sure. Let's actually rewind here. Was JD Vance on that couch? I'm kind of curious about it. Maybe they didn't put him in the room this time around. But you can definitely... Oh, no, there he is. There he is. Okay, so Vance is still there. But definitely what you notice is, first of all, I guess the changing in tone from Zelensky, right? He came, he brought the letter to Trump for Melania. He sounded a lot more calm this time, a lot more reserved. Of course, notably, he's now agreeing to the concept of a trilateral summit with Putin. He's wearing a suit this time. Big change in demeanor. Now, we'll see what happens in the meeting itself. But this is part of the reason why I stated I believe things have started to change, right? And people are like, well, you know, Zelensky will never change. No, Zelensky's a bit of a shapeshifter, okay? If people remember, back in 2019, he's defending Trump against the impeachment, and then when Biden is president, he's sucking up to Biden, obviously, and he's getting applauded in the Congress. He's on Vogue magazine. He suddenly reinvents himself as like this left-wing figure, and I think now, after the February meeting where he sort of realized that he messed up, I don't know, maybe it's a sign of the accepting of reality there, like I said, right? So that'll be interesting for sure to watch. Apparently, among the European nations in attendance are the UK, France, Germany, and Finland. So we kind of know where the most of them stand on this war, but it'll be interesting to see how demanding do they get, because these have also been countries, like I said, who have been uttering similar sentiments as Zelensky for years, that like they need to give back everything, we need to stand up to Russia, blah, blah, blah. But again, when you're in a situation where your nations are basically flat broke and you don't actually have the resources to fight this war without America, then what happens there? Also notable that both leaders, but especially Trump, don't seem willing to get into too many details, right, in terms of the particulars. A lot of journalists tried to ask, Steve Doocy there being one of them. And Trump has basically kept it very vague, much like the Putin summit itself. And again, I think that's smart, okay? As this is being litigated continually, to reveal anything to the American media, who, as they noted there in that press conference, is actively trying to sabotage the peace talks, and we certainly know why that's the case. We know that their motive is very clear, right? They are pro-war. They largely nowadays, especially considering the free press is not so free anymore, represent the same interests as the Pentagon, the same interests as the war lobbyists in Washington. That's very smart. Also, the kind of attempts to create another 2.0 situation were avoided, right? I forget who it was. Someone asked Trump, what do you believe? Does Ukraine still not have the cards? Trump basically just says he doesn't want to answer that question. So that said, I guess time will tell. But there does seem to be an attitude that, you know, as compared to maybe the beginning of this war, where it's just a lot of tension and back and forth and bickering, that you're starting to see a different attitude by all sides on this war, right? Putin met with Trump. He flew to Alaska. He flew to the United States to meet with Trump, which, as Trump pointed out, is not a power move on Russia's part. It's a power move on America's part, because we're the host country. We're not even meeting in a third-party area. It's you're coming to us, that we're hosting you, and, you know, you had that meeting. Now Zelensky, even wearing a suit, okay? Sort of wearing a suit. But you know what? Progress. So that's why I say, given everything we've seen, again, also given the fact that Russia is gaining territory over the summer, who knows, right? I firmly believe the EU delegation, for instance, is probably here to try to either, if not sabotage the peace talks, push too hard. We'll see what happens ultimately in that Oval Office right now. But you know, let's all hope and pray that things ultimately go well here. That said, I know we got some super chats during the meeting, so I want to read here and give a shout out to some of those. So let's get into that here. Let's see, we got LMO for $5. Thank you very much. Says, thanks, Vince, you're the best. I saw some people complaining about this dinosaur, by the way. What's wrong with the dinosaur, okay? It's the default Streamlabs emoticon. I guess we can make our own. But, you know, I don't really know what to put there. So leave your thoughts if you don't like the dinosaur as to what should replace the dinosaur. James Bond sends $10 to Super Chat. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Feel free to send your Super Chats with thoughts, comments, or if you just want to support the show, I appreciate it very much. And we got Jacob Hawley for $20. Thank you very much here. Says, I am liberal, borderline on progressive, but I'm extremely conservative on immigration, foreign policy, and culture war issues. Don't listen to the Democratic Party. I like his law and order policy. He has not lost me. Well, thank you very much for the 20, Jacob. I appreciate it. And, well, I guess, you know, sometimes politics or political beliefs can be complicated. I think that there's a major reason why a lot of the original Bernie bros in 2016 ended up going over to Trump in the years since, because there is a realignment. I'm guessing you're probably progressive on economic views, but on social views, you're more so conservative. There used to be a term for this. It was called a blue dog Democrat, but those are essentially non-existent today in the party. You know, if you're not, you know, sucking up to the institutions, if you're not cheering on mass migration, if you're not cheering on war, then they'll say you're not a real Democrat, obviously. But thank you very much for the 20, Jacob Hawley. I appreciate the support here, guys. And let's see what else we got going on here in live chat. Hit the like button. Yes, I agree. All right. We have 323 likes, 600 viewers. Feel free to hit the like button. We are waiting here right now for, well, let's see how long the meeting goes. I guess they're set to hold a multilateral meeting at 3 p.m. Are we going to be waiting that long? Are we going to, oh gosh. Oh, here we go. Another full day stream. I had things to do today. But anyways, guys, that said, I do want to tune into what we were watching right before the press conference here, which was the Marco Rubio exchange with Margaret Brennan. Ooh, and you, by the way, you see this happening live right now. As I said on Friday, this is why they didn't reveal details of the meeting. The media is trying to sabotage it, even trying to muddy the waters here of the meeting happening today in the European delegation. They're saying, oh, well, they're bringing those people so Zelensky doesn't get bullied. Take a listen here to Marco Rubio just reveal the truth. So take a listen.
You know, there's concern from the Europeans that President Zelensky is going to be bullied into signing something away. That's why you have these European leaders coming as backup tomorrow. Can you?
No, it isn't. That's not why they're coming as back. That's not true. No, but that's not that's not true. They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're not coming.
That February Oval Office meeting in front of television cameras where President Zelensky. Do
you know how many meetings we've had since then?
Oh no, I know, and I was just up in Alaska watching the one with Vladimir Putin where a red carpet rolled out.
No, but it was Zelensky. We've had more meetings. We've had one meeting with Putin and like a dozen meetings with Zelensky. So, but that's not true. They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're coming here tomorrow because we've been working with the Europeans. We talked to them last week. There were meetings in the UK over the previous weekend.
And they said President Trump was going to demand a ceasefire
as early as Thursday. No, but
by the way, you already can hear just a lot of the ridiculousness, right? They rolled out a red carpet, guys. Okay, they both walked on the red carpet. I don't understand. It's an aesthetic choice, right? Like the reading into this. And by the way, on that very red carpet is where Trump buzzed Vladimir Putin with a B-2 and F-35 flyover. Okay, which was a power move. But, oh, they let the war criminal walk on the red carpet. Again, this is basically their narrative is, well, if Trump wasn't throwing tomatoes at him or mooning him or flipping him off, then how dare you kowtow to Putin, right? Because diplomacy just doesn't exist. It's never happened before. You know, you definitely don't smile and shake someone's hand when they come to your country to talk about ending a war. No. Everyone knows the way to end a war is to, you know, just flip them off and cuss them out. That's how you negotiate, by the way. You know, that's how you reach peace. That's how you win the Nobel Peace Prize, apparently, that they refuse to give Trump. Just ridiculous.
You said that they're coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. They're not coming here tomorrow. Oh, this is such a stupid media narrative that they're coming here tomorrow because Trump is going to bully Zelensky into a bad deal. We've been working with these people for weeks on this stuff. They're coming here tomorrow because they chose to come here tomorrow. We invited them to come. We invited them to come. The president invited them to come.
But the president told those European leaders last week that he wanted a ceasefire. The president went on television, said he would walk out of the meeting if Vladimir Putin didn't agree with one. He said there would be severe consequences if he didn't agree to one. He said he'd walk out in 2 minutes. He spent 3 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and he did not get one. So there's
because obviously things happened during that meeting. Well, because obviously look, our goal here is not to stage some production for the world to say, oh, how dramatic, he walked out. Our goal here is to have a peace agreement, to end this war, okay? And obviously we felt, and I agreed, that there was enough progress, not a lot of progress, but enough progress made in those talks to allow us to move to the next phase. If not, we wouldn't be having Zelensky flying all the way over here. We wouldn't be having all the Europeans coming all the way over here. Now understand, and take with a grain of salt, I'm not saying we're on the verge of a peace deal, but I am saying that we saw movement, enough movement to justify a follow-up meeting with Zelensky and the Europeans, enough movement for us to dedicate even more time to this. You talk about the sanctions. Look, at the end of the...
Well, the hilarious thing, too, is that if that had happened, right? If Trump stormed out in 15 minutes, you think the anti-Putin, you know, pro-war, all this stuff media, do you think they would have given Trump credit for that? Oh, he showed he wasn't willing to negotiate and he flipped Putin off. No, you know what they would say? Trump wasn't diplomatic. It was unprofessional, guys. Although, who knows, right? Maybe you can make the counter argument that the media has more vested interest in wanting this war than hating Donald Trump, so maybe they would applaud him because the whole thing went south and we're not getting an end to the war. But again, you see the agenda here.
Today, if peace is not going to be possible here, and this is just going to continue on as a war, people will continue to die by the thousands. The president has that option to then come in and impose new sanctions. But if he did this now, the moment the president puts those additional sanctions, that's the end of the talks. You've basically locked in at least another year to year and a half of war and death and destruction. We may unfortunately wind up there, but we don't want to wind up there. We want to wind up with a peace deal that ends this war so Ukraine can go on with the rest of their lives and rebuild their country and be assured that this is never going to happen again. That's the goal here. We're going to do everything possible to make that happen. If it's doable, it will require both sides to make concessions. It will require both sides to get things they're asking for. That's how these deals are made, whether we like it or not.
This is another point I've heard Marco Rubio make on the front of sanctions too, and it's actually pretty intelligent because he keeps getting this question for some odd reason. Why are you not putting more sanctions? I mean, we have been basically sanctioning Russia, it's worth noting, since 2014, but why are you not putting more on? Well, as he pointed out, if we go the path of sanctioning Russia, what does that essentially say? It says the peace talks are over, right? We're just going to be in this stalemate, which is basically the approach that Biden took, by the way. But to try to sanction him while you have ongoing peace talks is ridiculous. Now, that said, Trump has made a very interesting threat that basically Biden, despite his years of claiming, oh, Russia's so bad, blah, 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 never once floated the idea of actually going after the way Russia is getting around Western sanctions, which is trade with India, right? When it comes to products, energy, all that stuff, right? The EU won't trade with Russia, so what do? The EU trades with India. India just sells it to Russia. Sure, it's upcharged a little bit, but not by much, and you're all around it. So it's actually worth noting at the same time that despite this narrative of him being soft, actually the way that Putin got to this meeting, and what I firmly believe was the catalyst of, because, you know, it was a complaint that Trump had about Putin thus far. He's not super serious. He'll call me and say he loves me and he wants peace, and then he'll drone strike something right afterward. I think the catalyst that brought him to Alaska was the threat that Trump made was, well, we're going to tariff or we're going to sanction India. We're going to go after India for allowing Russia to bypass the sanctions, right? We're going to go after those third-party countries. And it's just so ironic that the EU, despite all of their grandstanding about this, has not done that, right? They're like, oh, we are going to put sanctions on Russia, but Russia is still trading with us. Oh, how? No, because they didn't want to go there, right? Biden, for whatever reason, same thing. I don't know if it's he didn't want to piss off India. He didn't want to upset our allies, as they so often say, right? Our so-called allies who rip us off already. But that was the main difference, right? But all of this narrative you keep hearing is that Trump is surrendering to Russia. No. If he surrendered to Russia, we would have walked out in Alaska having signed an agreement, and it would have given Putin everything he wants. Guess what? That's not the way that it went, right? If he was surrendering to Russia, he would not be floating the India tariffs over his head. Again, by the way, despite the narrative that the last administration was tough on Russia, didn't even do that, right? They refused to go after the way Russia was bypassing the sanctions, which is honestly just typical Joe Biden policy, right? It's like, oh, we're doing a border security reform, and then people just walk around the border. Same thing. Empty threats, right? But, you know, there's just this often belief that, oh, if you just put more sanctions on Russia, they're going to stop. Well, did they stop? No. By the way, who was most damaged by Russia's sanctions? Was it Russia? Actually, no, it was the European Union. It was like throwing a boomerang in the cartoon and it comes back and hits you in the face. Because when a nation like Germany and much of the western part of that continent is completely reliant, as Trump warned you years ago, by the way, on Russian energy, then what happened over in Europe? What happened? Guess what? Energy prices skyrocketed, right? Big surprise. And you know, the European economies now massively struggling because of it. But, you know, I guess they ban more paper straws. That's going to make the difference. Let's actually pull that up for you on the Russian energy thing, because I think this is such a relevant point to make when all of these, well, I mean, I guess today maybe it's going to stop. But of course, for years, the prior Trump administration, right, the first Trump administration, so often told Germany, told other European nations, hey, do not build Nord Stream. Stop trying to rely on Russian energy, because guess what that is, right? Newsflash, it's a security threat. And what happened, if you may remember here, they laughed him out of the building. Now these are the people virtue signaling to us saying we're abandoning Ukraine, even though they haven't given a dollar basically to Ukraine proportional to GDP. All right? So let's go down memory lane. You want to talk about so many ways in which, if Trump were president, the war would not have happened. Well, I mean, yeah, you could make that argument on toughness, but also in terms of policy, right? A big reason why Russia knew they could invade and basically get away with it is because however outraged the European Union was going to be, their entire economy and supply chain is reliant on Russia, right? Russia has them by the you-know-what. And guess who tried to warn them back in 2018?
Construction of a Baltic pipeline so that nations are not dependent on Russia to meet their energy needs. Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere.
And look at that. They're laughing at him, okay? The smug globalist morons. You're so silly, Mr. Trump. What are you talking about? Isn't he's just so full of like misinformation and conspiracy theories, man, all the time. Oh, wait a minute. So that's 7 years ago. Oh, look what happens in 2025 at the Munich Security Conference. If I'm not mistaken, by the way, I don't know his name, but same guy, right? See this guy with the glasses? Here he is speaking, by the way, 7 years later.
From the encroachment.
Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Yeah, you better retire, buddy. By the way, look at these headlines from 2022. We never got the credit for this, by the way. One of the most underratedly intelligent things that Trump ever did or pushed, and no one really talks about it, even in the context of now, right? If they had listened from the beginning, this might be a little bit different. But 2022 news headlines, quote, "We were all wrong how Germany got hooked on Russian energy." Who tried to warn you about that, by the way? Who tried to warn you about that? And again, you have to pick one side or the other, okay? That's the thing about Europe. Now, they could do the alternative. They could say if Russia invaded Ukraine, all right, fine. Russia's our friend. We're just going to look the other way. But notice they're not. They're not. Now they're Russia's so bad. Oh, really? Really? If they're so bad, if he's such a brutal dictator, like Russia-EU relations were actually pretty warm, pre-2020. What's up with that? So suddenly now he's a dictator, right? You guys didn't care about Crimea or any of those things, but suddenly now, oh no, right? Here's another one. Germany has been forced to admit it was a terrible mistake to become so dependent on Russian oil and gas. So why did it happen? It happened because you didn't listen to Trump. You didn't listen to Trump, And, it's kind of ironic throughout history that this issue of Germany needing Russian oil and gas. I've seen that one before. But just saying. Here's another one. Why Germany can't just pull the plug on Russian energy. Under increasing pressure to sever the country's reliance on Russian energy, German officials must contend with deeply rooted economic ties. Again, who was telling you back in the 2010s to try to buy American natural gas, which, by the way, recently it was announced they've finally done. I think that was about a month or two ago, right? So Germany is now going to be buying our natural gas, by the way, for much more expensive, very likely, because it's got to go over the ocean. But you know what? That's what you asked for. You incited this to happen because, first of all, I want people to understand this. A lot of people talk about NATO, and that's true. There's all that drama there. But a big reason here, guys, to understand as to why this war happened is because Russia knew. They knew, obviously, Europe was going to sanction them and all that. That's given, right? We expected that. But they understood that because of the European Union, specifically Germany and the major powers' reliance on Russian energy, there was nothing they could really do about it, right? Russia had the leverage here. And then on the flip side, right, what happened since is that instead of just like admitting there's nothing they could do, Germany tries to make a stand and be a tough guy, but guess what? Guess what? Their economy is screwed up, and they're still buying Russian gas, by the way. You know, they're using the workaround, sure, third-party nations, they're pretending they're not doing it. They're still buying Russian energy. It's just more expensive because of the sanctions. And, you know, I guess it's a way to push the climate change stuff more if they want, right? Let's just stop consuming electricity or something. But that said, there you have it. Here's another classic of this, by the way. This is him telling the NATO leaders to their face, warning him years ago. Did they listen? No, they did not. So, look, here's the thing, right? In these people's infinite hubris, if years ago Trump warned you about this exact thing happening, you didn't listen, and now you're in the position you are today, does that not give him a little bit of credibility to speak today? Maybe his path towards what to do, how to end the war, might be smarter than you guys. Like, have you guys considered you're actually not correct about things? You're actually wrong about everything, right? Same thing we say to the Democrats, but it's true. It's true. Anyways, here's a vintage classic.
It's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries, and then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia, where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened. And I think we have to talk to Germany about it. On top of that, Germany is just paying a little bit over 1%, whereas the United States, in actual numbers, is paying 4.2% of a much larger GDP. So I think that's inappropriate also. You know, we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting everybody, and yet we're paying a lot of money to protect. Now, this has been going on for decades. This has been brought up by other presidents, but other presidents never did anything about it because I don't think they understood it or they just didn't want to get involved. But I have to bring it up because I think it's very unfair to our country. It's very unfair to our taxpayer. And I think that these countries have to step it up, not over a 10-year period. They have to step it up immediately. Germany is a rich country. They talk about they're going to increase it a tiny bit by 2030. Well, they could increase it immediately tomorrow and have no problem. I don't think it's fair to the United States. So we're going to have to do something because we're not going to put up with it. We can't put up with it, and it's inappropriate.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the picture you got to look at, okay? As I said earlier, Trump is basically rewriting the world order, okay? Because I think you see post, the Cold War, the polarity of the world was aligned in a certain way. Today in 2025, it still largely looks like that, but the cracks are coming undone, right? The world is changing. And in NATO, for instance, you're dealing with a largely European coalition who, as Trump points out, first of all, they're not giving money. They're not really adequately supporting America. And, they get all these stupid, it's very EU of them, Oh, we will do a 10-year commitment to raise spending by 2%, and we're going to go through the bureaucracy first and permitting process to put the money in, then nothing's going to get done, blah, 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 bureaucracy. In short, they're not really doing it, right? And then at the same time, during the Cold War, you could say America largely commanded like NATO as a uniform body, but that's obviously not the case now. You have NATO nations trying to basically, in a way, sell themselves out to Russia, but then pretending to be anti-Russia and this and that. And so what are we dealing with, right? We're not dealing with our so-called allies based on shared values or principles or something. No, we're dealing with what is now largely a coalition of like freeloader nations who do more to undermine us than they do to actually advance our own interests. And that's just the reality. Hold on, let me refresh here. And so, are we still live? Okay, sorry, my screen froze there. And, you know, I really looked at something, by the way, like the infamous J.D. Vance speech at the Munich Security Conference earlier this year. And you have to point to this and say that, look, I don't think it's going to happen under Trump's presidency. I think it's going to take time. But this was the end of NATO. We're going to look back at this and say this was the end of NATO. Because after years of Trump bringing up these issues and the realization that, as I said, over time, the strategic interests of the European Union and the United States are starting to diverge, what alliance do we really have left nowadays? It's very one-sided, you know? We can trade together. I'm not saying go fight each other or something, but militarily, they're not actually really helping a whole lot. And when it comes to something like Russian energy, they're undermining. Because that's the thing, as I said, it's not just the NATO stuff. It is European reliance on Russian energy, despite the warnings of America not to do that, that allowed this war to happen. That's the reason Putin knew he could go into this and not wreck his own situation, right? And even on the front of the so-called shared values, I mean, I'm sure we all remember this infamous moment from the Munich Security Conference. So,
and unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Britain is the birthplace of the concept of free speech, by the way. The ideas that America is founded on originally come from Britain, and look at them now, right? Look at them now. Very, Very sad. But, you know, you're seeing the same game happen with this too right now, by the way. You know, the Europeans are responding that, oh, that's not true. We have free speech, right? I wonder in 4 to 5 years now, who's going to say they were right about this too? But that said, I think this all kind of begs the question, when you say our alliance, if it's not on shared interests, it's on shared values. Okay, shared values of what, though? Of what? Because in the Cold War, you could say it was anti-communism, and that's enough. Okay, fine. But what about now? Right? The Cold War, the communism thing is a little dated, right? It's not really practically applied anymore. And even then, I mean, is what's the... I'm not sure one would argue that the West even won the Cold War in the end, because you look at the situation in the end, right? Did we really defeat them? I don't know. But, you know, this is all to say that hopefully the European delegation with Zelensky today does not try to get too involved or too annoying. Or if they do, they basically understood the last saving grace perhaps of the NATO alliance would be if the EU powers and the UK included there basically understand, look, America's the only nation with the power and the leverage to like actually achieve a peace here and actually go forward. You can't really do it without us. So you better listen to us in many regards. But that'll be interesting to see what actually happens there. You know, notably, what happened? So for a long time, for instance, right, you have the August 1st tariff deadline. This is another reason why I say maybe things, you could see signs of positivity in this regard, is that the EU and Trump were not really moving anywhere on trade, right? And as usual, Brussels is making the excuse that we got to go through the Commission, the EU Commission. We got to go through the 27 countries and all this garbage. And then what happened magically is very interesting, very interesting. Just a few days after Japan came up with a pretty innovative trade deal that was basically like a 15-15 agreement and all this, Brussels came rushing saying, oh, we want to copy the same trade deal, and then days later it was done. So maybe, and that was, by the way, only like a week before the August 1st deadline. And then Canada, the day before, on July 31st, tries to call up Trump, and Trump tells them no. So maybe that's a sign that in terms of diplomatic relations, Europe is somewhat understanding that they don't have a lot of leverage in this regard, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Now, apparently, guys, checking back in here at the Zelensky situation, he is set to hold a family photo with the European leaders here at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Judging by the flags, I guess we got Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Ukraine, and the UK all there. And an EU flag as well, so I don't know if there's a Brussels representative there. But there you have it. That said, in the meantime, we'll check here some of our live chat. So, Gavin better be in prison way before 2028 or I'll be very mad. Well, realistically, I think you're going to be very mad because I doubt... He probably should be, especially for the PG&E scandal, but you know how it goes. You know how it goes. So, let us go on here. 47, Trump's team so far has been the best team ever, no doubt about it. Yeah, he really has put together a lot of rock stars in the cabinet. Much better than the first term. You know, that's for sure. You look at so much we lost in the first term, whether it was that cabinet or it was the Russia thing, you know, you really think about it, right? You're not saying Trump, one, didn't have a lot of success in some regards, but largely speaking, that was a political mandate that was completely taken from us, right? And now here we are finally with the power to do anything, but what are they still doing? Obstructing. So let us see what else we got going on here. No, let Gavin run for president. It's very interesting. A July Gallup poll, we're going to cover this in the video later today, most likely, came out on Newsom and his favorability rating. And 70% of voters who were polled already had an opinion on him. So it's not like he's a no-name recognition person at this point, and I think that's well established. It was 41% disapprove, 30% approve. And the gender gap was staggering, right? I think among women, he had a +2 approval rating, but among men, he had -25. Well, needless to say, you're -25 with one of the genders and only +2 with the other. That's terrible, right? Needless to say, we understand the reason why the female demographic not only is generally more liberal, but perhaps drawn to Newsom. But even then, +2, mathematically, not nearly enough to retcon or erase the fact that he's completely underwater with the male demographic, who I think largely see through his sociopathic, fraudulent identity. And the issue is that I think if he already has 70% of people combined who have an opinion on him, that's not a lot of room left for the undecideds or the unknowns yet to really claw that back. So pretty interesting reality check, because when you look within the online democratic machine, I guess you could call it, and the media one as well, and even I would say I think it's well established, like Newsom's the front runner. They think he's going to be the guy and all of that. But could you see another 2024 situation with him in its own regard where, yeah, he's good looking. Yeah, he's, I guess they say charismatic or something, but it's ultimately putting lipstick on a pig, and through an entire presidential cycle, how long until the actual unpopularity of him within the actual people of California, the people who've lived through his policies, or those who see through the facade, see through the, just sociopathic fake behavior, does that break through? That'll be interesting to see, right? Because I think a lot of the central Democrat thesis around Newsom is, well, as compared to Kamala Harris or Tim Walz, I was friends with school shooters, he infamously said, Newsom is obviously, like, he's good looking, he's a white guy, he's kind of polished, he's objectively a good politician in the sense that he is very good at sneaking out of stuff, right? He's slithery, he's a bit of a snake. This will all be enough of a veneer to put on top of what is ultimately still, like, largely the same Democrat Party, the same platform. Well, will that theory actually succeed? Or, as you saw in 2024, is the lack of substance behind the Democrat Party and the lack of actually popular ideas, just because you put a more effective messenger up there than Kamala Harris, does that actually change the picture? Well, that's going to be basically, assuming Newsom, who is the favorite, ends up winning, that's going to be the defining question of the 2028, I should say, election. So we'll see what happens there. On top of that, of course, if you remove illegal aliens from the census and redo the census like Trump wants to happen, then that would also throw another wrench in Gavin Newsom's problem. Because without illegals being added to the census apportionment, you'd likely look at a situation, according to a lot of the math that's been done on this, where the race for Pennsylvania, right, everyone says Pennsylvania is the state that decides the election, it wouldn't exist. Because so long as the Republicans win the Sun Belt, that being Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona, the states that are a little more red leaning, generally speaking, you're already at 270. So that changes the entire game of how the election obviously would work. Now, that said, we know, by the way, that Pete Buttigieg has literally, I think there's a poll that literally shows he has a 0% approval rating with black voters. But, in a state like Georgia, is Newsom enough to energize black voters? I don't know. It's a good question, right? North Carolina, I guess you got the same thing. Latino voters in Arizona and Nevada, I mean, judging by the fact they live next to California, they're probably the most familiar. I don't know how well he would do out there, I don't even know how well he would do in a re-election bid with voters in his own state, frankly. He'd win, but what would the margins be? I don't know. And this is all, of course, assuming that his redistricting special election succeeds in November, which is still not a guarantee, because that's the thing, right? He wins that. That's a lot of momentum. He's going to be essentially anointed, I think, likely at that point, as a Democratic frontrunner, because I don't think anyone can catch him. But what if he fails? What if the map doesn't go through? Then that'd be a massive embarrassment. So, we would have to wait and see on that front. It is 2:25 p.m. Apparently, there's going to be a photo taken very soon, so we'll see. Apparently, they're going to have a lunch or something at 3 p.m. I don't know if we're going to stay live for the entire meeting, frankly. We got to sit here and wait and filibuster for like 3 hours until we see the final press conference. But we'll see. We'll decide. Guys. Trump leaving as president at the end of the term does not mean he is gone. He has a strong team with great speakers that can stay in place. That's a true power. Yeah, I mean, I think the advantage of Vance in 2028, you could largely keep much of the same cabinet in place. You would think, at least. I don't know, but you would think. So that would be nice, right? You basically have the same people internally running the government. Maybe make some changes as, I don't know, Department of Justice or something like that. But largely speaking, you know, it would certainly be a continuation. Michael Bowe says, I think Trump's policy on crime would be a huge boost for the next election. Of course, this is the trap that Democrats are walking into once again, is because of Trump derangement syndrome, wanting to just oppose everything that he supports or does or stands for. They're thus far, right? You think about the fact that in April, Trump's approval was kind of at a low because you had Liberation Day, uncertainty, chaos. Okay, well, that's all whatever, right? It happens. But notice when Trump's approval started to kind of tick back up and the momentum seemed to shift, it all started, you know, ironically with who? Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Because I've said this all along. First of all, immigration is one of Trump's most popular issues. When Democrats make the national focus on immigration, they are losing. They're losing. Every poll shows this. Even polls that show Trump having a negative approval rating, they're not good polls for Trump, right? Still, border security ranks as one of his top issues. Because this is always a misestimation of how Americans really feel. Americans are much more hawkish on two things, crime and immigration, than the political class in DC seems to believe. Speaking of Europe, by the way, the same is true in Europe, right? Despite the fact that their democracy does not really represent them, and people go back and forth, whatever, I guarantee you the average opinion of a European on the migration crisis is significantly to the right of even what the so-called conservative parties believe in that country, right? So this is all to say that when Democrats make a national issue off of, first of all, immigration, when they just lost, by the way, an election off of the issue of immigration, right? Economy was a big factor, but was the number 2 issue. Everyone knows this. The border. It's not exactly smart to go back to 2026 and say, okay, let's make the election about immigration again. And then 2 months later, what do? Crime. Oh boy, that's the one, right? That's the issue we're going to beat Trump on. Absolutely not. You've seen even in deep blue cities, by the way, in Los Angeles in 2024, George Gascon, the Soros-backed attorney general, or not, district attorney, I should say, got voted out of office by a huge margin. Why? Because even among liberal Democrat voters who would never vote for Trump in a million years, crime is not a popular policy with anyone. Same with the mayor of Oakland, same with nationwide ballot propositions. Same, by the way, ironically, even with Eric Adams. If people remember back to 2021, that primary where he won the election, you had progressives in the race. You know what he did? He ran on a pro-police, anti-crime platform. That's why he won among Democrats, okay? Which is to say, take that agenda to the swing districts. Talk about crime, Democrats. See how that's going to work out for you, right? So, massive mistakes here being made by the Democrats. They constantly manage to just walk over or step on their own eggshells, I guess you could say. But what else is new? What else is new, right? It's so interesting. There was so much talk after 2024. You know, the virtue sign. You always knew it was fake, right? The Democrat Party needs to introspect. We need to learn from our mistakes. We need to learn from, losing 2024. Even heard a little bit of talk at the time because Trump won the election so big. Look, let's give the new president a chance, all that stuff. See how long that lasted? It was about 2 seconds. It was about 2 seconds, right? Now immediately, they're back to their 2019 selves, right? Everything Orange Man does is bad. Peace is bad. And right now, it's basically in terms of, they're basically saying, how dare you fulfill your own campaign promises? So, not sure that's the best standpoint, but there you have it. Let's see what else we got going on here in the chat. I watch you all the time from Barbados. Barbados, that's a long ways away. How many hours is that flight? I guess not that far from Florida, huh? No? Ah, okay. Yeah. Good to see you, man. I didn't know we had viewers in Barbados. That's pretty obscure. It's pretty obscure. I'd like to know what the smallest random microstate we have viewers in. Like, do we have people in the Maldives, guys? Anyone in the Maldives watching in the chat? I don't know. Andorra, San Marino. Do we have viewers in Swaziland? Someone's watching in Swaziland. But let's see here, guys. It's exactly 2:30. We're expecting the leaders to come and take a photo at any moment. And then apparently they're going to be having lunch at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Very, very normal time for lunch, by the way. But, EU, April says here, EU are Zelensky's parents making sure he does not screw up, in my opinion. Yeah, I guess it goes both ways. Or they're there to basically be like, oh, we're back up, right? Because Zelensky can't handle this on himself. He needs the whole European Union basically to come and baby him through the meeting. Very, very funny. Giovanna says, let's go to the border, Vince. Border Patrol loves the recognition. I don't know if there's anything to see at the border, though, right now, because there's no crossings, right? You know, I remember during the Biden presidency, you had a lot of right-wing independent journalists made their name. It was almost, I'm not saying it was easy, but it was a simple profession back then, too. Because you had so many crossings, so much chaos. You just go there, stand with your camera, and be like, hey, guys, here's what's happening. And, you know, honestly, a lot of credit to those people, because those random people on X are literally what made the border into a national issue, right? Because it was going on since the start of Biden's presidency. But you may remember back in 22, 23, that's when it starts to become this huge talking point that was ignored, even though it was happening the whole time. And why is that? Because random people on their cell phones just went and filmed what was happening, which is also going to be an issue for Newsom in 2028. Because you know what people can do? They can go to California, they can go to LA and San Francisco and just film what's happening. Boom, campaign ad done. More effective than millions of dollars in TV spending, because these images for free start being seen nationwide. So there you have it. Let's see what else we got going on here in the chat. The channel Forgotten History has a good video about Mayor Bass and her communist roots. I mean, that is true, yeah. She was part of a Maoist revolutionary organization, I believe, right? Back in the 70s and 80s. And, you know, I think that's true of a lot of Democrats. You look at it, a lot of them early in their life had these communist roots. Now, imagine the flip side. Okay, because you can say, oh, people change, they moderate. Maybe to some degree that's true, I don't know. But imagine if you had all these right-wing politicians who either were in neo-Nazi organizations themselves, like Karen Bass, or were mentored by neo-Nazis when they're younger, but now they're like, oh, you know, I evolved from those opinions. Would that be let me just ask, would that be an acceptable position to hold for you to be going into mainstream politics and being a part of being an elected official? I don't think that would be the case, right? Imagine that. Imagine that. You know, when I was in college, I was in the Aryan Brotherhood, but trust me, I've changed. Well, does that ever fly? No. But, you know, Zoran Mandani can say, yeah, I'm like a communist, but now I'm only just a socialist, right? You know, Karen Bass can be like, I'm just a normal Democrat, everyone, all these people. And it's just totally fine. It's just totally fine, you know? You look at people, too, like, you know, Jesse Jackson, even Obama, right? Had some mentors in the past on this front. It's crazy. Angela Davis, by the way, she was a nutcase back in the 70s. Now she's a professor, actually. I think she's a professor at, what is it, UCSB or something like that? And she was back there in the 70s, like, calling for the killing of white people directly, like, out there. Inciting violence and terrorism. And then now, oh, she's a respected thought leader of the left. That's a true story, by the way. True story. Just imagine that, right? Imagine that. The flip side, if someone, like I said, if someone was in the Aryan Brotherhood in their 20s, in the 50s, and in their 50s they're running for office, would that ever fly? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. But apparently when you're on the left, it doesn't matter, you know? You can just completely rewrite your entire history and no one really cares, you know? It's not alarming to anyone. Yeah, you used to be part of like a Maoist, Castroist revolutionary group. Oh, you want to be in Congress? You want to be the mayor of Los Angeles? No problem. No problem. Not only that, we'll anoint you to the position. Because that's basically what happened with Karen Bass, right? She got the mayorship for free, essentially, you know? There were actual local leaders, that also Democrats, but still, we tried to run for that position, and the Democrat Party said, nope, we're anointing Bass to the mayorship. And you see her here today. She's completely unqualified, and you know the story. So, Border Patrol arrested people at Newsom's rally. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things I've ever seen in politics, okay? Fantastic, fantastic. Please do this more. All right, let's just follow him around in 2028. Everywhere he goes, ICE is outside. And then, ironically, he's going to be like, why are my rallies so empty? No one's coming. Well, maybe because immigration enforcement is outside, huh? So there you have it. AOC hasn't made her appearance at Alligator Alcatraz. You know, that's a good point. Why is she not in front crying? Remember that picture? She's pretending to cry when the kids were in cages in the first Trump term. We need AOC to go to Florida, okay? I want to see a picture of her crying outside Alligator Alcatraz. So, you know, actually on that front, even AOC, I would argue, is someone who is kind of currently trying to rewrite her identity. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, right? She's still very far left on economics, but she's kind of dropping some of the social stuff, you know, the gender nonsense. Or she's trying to kind of evolve into maybe someone who's more palatable nationwide. And just notice how these people get away with it. They just get away with it, you know? Newsom, same thing, by the way, in his own regard, right? Newsom, of course, worst governor, arguably in American history, and now Democrat frontrunner, pretending like he's some type of sensible moderate. Oh, I had Charlie Kirk on my podcast. Oh, I actually don't think men should play women's sports, even though I'm filing lawsuits actively as I say that to keep men in women's sports, you know? That's how it goes. That's how it goes. Fady says, yes, Zelensky wore a suit. Zelensky showed defiance by still not wearing a tie with the suit. Well, he did have a tie. It's just a black tie and a black shirt. So he basically showing up like, I don't know, a waiter at a fancy restaurant or some type of like vampire or something from a movie. But he did dress up. He did dress up. And that, of course, is a sign perhaps that things here are beginning to change. And of course, you know, it's interesting. People have so long begged the question as to why do you guys care so much whether he wears a suit or not? You know, he's fighting a war, obviously. But here's always been my frustration with it, is that the costume by Zelensky of pretending, you know, by the way, he doesn't even wear an official military uniform. He's wearing some random fatigues off of like H&M or something. I don't know, right? But it's a costume. And it's a costume precisely meant to appeal to, back during Biden, the very idiotic Hollywood liberal types who want to make everything a show. That's the same reason he's on Vogue magazine and all this stuff. And my first of all issue with this is completely fake, right? It's just meant to show these optics of like, oh, look, normal people watching this, I'm fighting a war. And, you know, some people, I guess there's an appeal, right? All the Hollywood liberal types indeed did what? Mr. Zelensky, you're so amazing. Time Person of the Year, best guy ever. But to people who are not swayed by that nonsense, we're just like, what are you doing? What is with this, right? You're basically an actor. And he is an actor, by the way. He used to be an actor. But it communicates this idea that, like, he's trying to gaslight the people of this country by putting on some show. Okay? And the argument, by the way, he's fighting a war. He doesn't have time to put on a suit. It's just so utterly ridiculous. His delegation today are all wearing suits, by the way. Okay, and even if you're really that busy, you can change on the plane. You can change in the freaking bathroom before, before he goes. You mean to tell me you don't have 30 seconds to change? Okay, you know? You can change in the car on the way to the White House if it's really that serious. But of course, it's never about that, right? It's not about the fact he's fighting a war. That's why he doesn't have time to put one on. No, it's like this costume intentionally designed to put on this fake theatrical show that I find to be very insulting to my own intelligence. Okay, forgive me. But that's the problem I see with it. And it's just utterly unprofessional. You've never seen any other person that I can think of, frankly, show up to the White House dressed like that. You know, it just doesn't happen. You're a world leader. You're coming, by the way, it's a respect thing as well, because you're coming to the country. It's not any country, the one that's giving you all the money, you know, the reason you're fighting the war, and you can't show some respect, some, you know, level of dignity to the White House that you're in to dress professionally. It's just unacceptable on many different levels, you know? And again, the fakeness, the theatrics of it, that's what I always found to be the most ridiculous, you know? Churchill wore a suit when he was in London during the Blitz. Yeah, because guess what? Okay, by the way, another interesting question. So considering that Zelensky's not walking around naked, okay, he has time in the morning to put on the fatigues. What's the difference between the time it takes to do that and the time it takes to put on the suit? Okay, fine, you gotta button stuff up, do the tie. Heck, have your freaking assistants pre-tie the tie. It's fine, right? They can iron, your aides can iron the suit. They can have it ready. They can help you put it on, right? But, you know, it takes what, 15, 30 extra seconds? It's just ridiculous. The argument there is utterly ridiculous. No, it's an intentional choice, and the reasons he makes that intentional choice are to appeal to the very idiotic people who I am calling out here, and that's really the truth of it, right? That's really how it goes. His rival wore a suit, yeah. Well, in some ways, his rival has made more intelligent decisions in terms of just his own interests, you could say, than the other guy right there. So you know how it goes. You haven't heard Zelensky's personally leading tier 1 units, always single-handedly clearing the trenches? Yeah, exactly. Remember early in the war, he claimed he went to the front lines, and he just didn't. You know, it's just a photo op, right? But he's all dressed up. He had the helmet on and stuff. He's fighting with the people. Yeah, sure. Again, who are these photo ops supposed to appeal to? Stupid people who read the cover of Vogue magazine, hence why he's on Vogue magazine, you know? Same thing. Same story there. So, let's see. We are waiting this family photo. I don't know if we're going to stay live for the entire thing, because I don't know if I'm trying to wait till 6 p.m. for this joint speech, frankly. But we'll stay tuned at least for the photo here, guys. So, that said, if you got questions, comments, you just want to support the show, feel free to do so via the super chats. If we get more, maybe I'll keep the stream going for longer. But for now, let's see. This is a great community of common sense. I love it. Thank you very much. People should know that he's lying around in a luxury villa, true, while he disrespects his own military to feign a war posture while he snorts blank on a yacht. That does accurately sum up what's happening. Yes, indeed. A lot of these Ukrainian officials, by the way, since the war, they've gotten significantly wealthier. They're living in nice homes. I wonder what's going on there, right? Really wonder. It's a big corruption scheme. By the way, you know, you look at the... I think once this is all over, it's going to be really interesting to see who wins the contracts for the rebuilding of Ukraine. Because that's another angle on this, right? So, imagine the White House meeting with everyone wearing t-shirts. Yeah, we'd be the most unserious nation probably ever to exist. That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes. So, are you going to take this photo or what? Come on, what are you guys doing in there? Maybe they're arguing. They're playing cards. I'm not playing cards. It's very serious. Behind closed doors. All they're doing is playing cards. This is the truth from insider sources. Insider sources. Dupweb says I'm stuck in class right now. That's one thing I'll never miss. Finally done with school. Just graduated in May, and well, I really thought life would get less busy, but that's not necessarily the case. But you know, it's fun. I know the older people in chat are gonna laugh, but I feel so old now. You know. The first time in, what, 14, 15, no, longer than that. Math is off. Like, 19, 20 years of my life, I have not been in school. It's crazy. Crazy. I feel like a geriatric, you know? I look at some of these people who are like 19 and 20 now. I'm like, so freaking old. I'm only 22. But it's real. It's real. I'm about to be in the nursing home with Joe Biden here, guys. Vince, you can end the stream after the photos are taken, start a new stream later. Yeah. We got the videos to do too, though. You know? We got some Gavin Newsom news and stuff to talk about. Congratulations on graduating. Wish you the best. Thank you very much. I'm honestly pretty lucky. I don't think I'm ever going to use my college degree for what it was designed for, because when you look at the current state of the Gen Z employment crisis, especially for college graduates, it is a sad situation. And it's not just for people who are majoring in gender studies. I think that's the myth often told. No, you have kids, you major in computer science, engineering, all the things you're told are supposed to be, you know, useful. And then they get out, what? They can't find a job. Why can't they find a job? AI maybe is part of the reason. H-1B guest migrant visa workers, big problem, you know. And it's a bit of a social crisis at the moment. Really gets underrated. That's why you wonder why Gen Z, specifically Gen Z men, flip so hard in the election. That's a big reason why. Because people are, you know, COVID lockdowns, all that stuff. We remember that. But also, kids are going into the workforce and they can't find work, and it's not an issue of not trying, you know. There's these horror stories. People apply for 1,000 jobs on LinkedIn, don't get a single reply, you know. It's a massive problem. Youth unemployment, not talked about enough. And it's not just a problem in the US. Whole Western world, similar issues to varying degrees, but you know, that's the makings of revolution, right? That's it's a scary place to be. Because on one hand, they might flip to Trump, they could also flip toward Mondani, you know. That's I think the battle that you're currently going to be doing. 22, you look 42. Thank you very much, Harry Dunn. I appreciate it. Let's see here. Hello from Argentina. What do you think of Javier Milei, the president of Argentina? I think he's doing a great job. Okay, here we go. They've arrived, guys.
Now understand.
Keir Starmer looks like such a dork, man. He looks like Peter Griffin.
Not a good day. That was not a great day. Is everything okay? You all set? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, that was eventful. Not to read too much into body language, but I don't know. It seems like Zelensky and Trump are in decent spirits, but the other European leaders look pretty stone-faced, pretty unhappy. So I don't know. Again, that's like pure speculation, all right? I'm not going to be like CNN who says, Putin steamrolled Trump because he spoke first. However, you know, based on the fact we know nothing, the hope probably would be that Zelensky is just agreeing to what Trump wants and the Europeans are failing to influence the situation all too much, because we have known since the start of this war that the EU's demands are unreasonable and ridiculous. And same situation, by the way, seen after the fact, right? Even this year, back in February, you know, Macron was talking some crap, and guess what? He couldn't deliver on it. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll be the judge of how happy Trump is right now after I need a body language ghost. Yeah, we need the CNN experts to come on and explain to us. Explain to us peasants. What does it mean that Trump tilted his head 90 degrees to the left when someone asked a question, right? What does it mean that the two smiled at each other? Whoa, don't you know? This is communicating strength and something this and that. Kind of like stupidity, right? But okay, I guess I don't know if this is going to be live streamed or they're gonna say anything here, but it looks like they're gathering right now in the lunchroom. You know,
logical background. You just got to pick up the phone and talk to someone, just as President Trump encouraged with North Korea when he brought them to peace terms and the first president to walk over the demilitarized zone in 2019, perhaps in all of North Korean history. And after the Korean engagement, that war that has technically never ended. We do have the ceasefire on the table, but most presidents will look through their binoculars into the demilitarized zone. President Trump walked over that line from South Korea to North Korea at the invitation of Little Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un, the leader of that nation. So it's about dialogue. It's about talking to people, and this president doing perhaps what he does best, the deal maker in chief, the negotiator in chief, the one who is committed to peace and ending the killing. Now,
you know what would be pretty intense is, has a U.S. president ever gone to Moscow at least during the Cold War? Let me Google that. Did a U.S. president visit Moscow during the Cold War. Reagan visited Moscow in '88. Okay, because that would be that pretty kind of historic. Okay, wait, let's see. Is stuff happening?
Isn't it just, it's such an incredible place. Well, we're building a big a ballroom. Beautiful. Right here. If you go, it would be right through that, right through here.
Well, we saw the ballroom at Sunday. That was...
It's going to be, I'll tell you about it. It's going to be fantastic, actually. You can let them come in. I think we're going to have a successful talk today.
Yeah. Me too.
Please, come on in. Do you guys want to take some questions or anything? You feel ready? Huh? Sit. Hi, Mark.
See you.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to have you here. Special place. White House is special no matter where you're from. Represents so much, and it really is beautiful. And thank you for all of the wonderful things that took place today. We've had a very successful day thus far, and important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal, very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled. I've just had the honor of being with President Zelensky and all of the discussions that we've had. We covered a lot of territory, and I spoke indirectly with President Putin today. We're going to call President Putin right after this meeting. I'm sure we're going to have a solid meeting, good meeting, maybe a great meeting, and we're going to try and work out a trilat after that and see if we can get it finished. Put this to sleep, because this is not since the Second World War has there been anything like this. So I'm honored to welcome NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's a great gentleman, great political leader in Europe generally, but now he's the NATO Secretary General, and you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Mark. Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom, our friend and my friend, and doing really well, and people like him a lot. We all like him. Everyone knows President Macron of France, who's been with me from the beginning, one of the first people I met as a foreign dignitary, and I liked him from day one. And I like him even more now. That's pretty good. That's unusual. That's a pretty unusual thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, who's a really a great leader and an inspiration over there. She's served now, even though she's a very young person, she's served there for a long period of time relative to others. They don't last very long. You've lasted a long time. You're going to be there a long time. Chancellor Merz of Germany, who is a very strong person and a very strong leader and very highly respected in Germany. And he's my friend, and it's an honor to have him as my friend. Thank you very much. Very good. You look great with your tan. Where did you get that tan? I want to get a tan like that. President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Huh? Where? Oh, you look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here because you're somebody that we all respect. And you've had a lot to do with the success, I think, and the potential success. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is somebody that we just made a big deal with all of those countries. I don't know. I think you might be more powerful than all these guys at this table. I don't know. But we had a great negotiation, and you're respected all over the world. So I want to thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you. The Alaska Summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that
In a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially. I'm optimistic that collectively we can reach an agreement that would deter any future aggression against Ukraine, and I actually think there won't be. I think that's even overrated, largely overrated, but we're going to find out, and I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. And negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who is, you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelensky and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin. And if you'd like, I'll go to that meeting. And not that I want to do that, but I will do that because we want to save a lot of people from dying. A lot of people are dying, and we got to save them. We got to save it. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people sometimes a week. All of us would obviously prefer an immediate ceasefire while we work on a lasting peace, and maybe something like that could happen. As of this moment, it's not happening, but President Zelensky and President Putin can talk a little bit more about that. You know, in the 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war, but it would be, I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing. But I believe a peace agreement at the end of all of this is something that's very attainable, and it can be done in the near future. With all of the wars that I got involved in, we only have this one left. Of course, as I walk out the door, there'll probably be a new one starting, and I'll get that stopped too. But I thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. It's actually one of the most difficult. They're very complex. The next step would be for a trilateral meeting, and that will be worked out. And I just look forward to working and having a great result. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about, and we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security. And that's pretty much the story. I'd like to say, Mr. President, would you like to say something? You have the media. If you want, you could come over and you could stand, you could use mine, or you could just turn around, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you so much. I can speak without microphone. Thank you so much. I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one. Or sorry, maybe the best one will be in the future. But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees. And we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts. They have been online before yesterday, and etc. So a lot of countries on the side of Ukraine, our people, and all of us want to finish this war, stop Russia and stop this war. We spoke about it, and we will speak more about security guarantees. This is very important that the United States gives such strong signal and is ready for security guarantees. The second point, or maybe the first, humanitarian direction, very important to exchange all the prisoners, and I think that President will help. And I was very thankful to your wife again, Mr. President, for the letter about our abducted children, and I hope that really it can be a historic role for the people to bring kids back to the families and be happy.
Get the people back, yeah.
Yes, this is so important, and I'm happy that we discussed it, this track with the President Trump, and I hope that we will find decisions. And then what is very important, that all the sensitive things, territorial, etc., we will discuss on the level of leaders during trilateral meeting, and President Trump will try to organize such meeting, and he said that he will come or not come. Ukraine will be happy if you will
both want me there, I will be there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is very important. Yes, so security guarantees, bringing kids back, and all our people, not only warriors, first of all warriors, and all the civilians, journalists, a lot of people in prison. So we need them back. And guarantees which will work for the years. We spoke about it, and I showed the President a lot of details on the battlefield, on the map. Thank you so much. Thank you for the map, by the way.
Good map.
It was great. I'm thinking how to take it back.
We'll get you.
No. I think that we had constructive, specific meeting, and I'm very thankful to all the leaders who are here, and you helped a lot, and so we're happy that we have such big unity today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great. But we're going to set that up today after this meeting. So very good and great remarks. I appreciate it. Mark, as head of NATO, maybe you could say a few words, please.
Yes, I will be very brief. I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock basically with President Putin by starting that dialogue. And I think it was in February that you had the first phone call, and from there we are now where we are today. And that is, I think, if we play this well, we could end this. And we have to end this. We have to stop the killing. We have to stop the destruction of Ukraine's infrastructure. It is a terrible war. So I'm really excited. And let's make the best out of today and make sure that from today onwards we get this thing to an end as soon as possible. I really want to thank you for your leadership, what you are doing for Vladimir, but of course also all the European colleagues. It is really crucial. And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. It's really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
Well, NATO also has agreed from 2% to 5%, which is something that is a massive amount of money. And it's 2% that wasn't always paid to 5% that is paid. That's a big difference. And so we appreciate that. That was a great move. Thank you very much. Ursula, maybe on behalf of the Commission, you could say a couple of words.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very important moment. Indeed, we are here, Europeans, as friends and allies. We had a fantastic NATO summit. Together as the two largest and biggest economies in the world, we had the largest trade deal ever agreed. And now we are here to work together with you on a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Stop the killing. This is really our common interest, stop the killing. And indeed, it's very good to hear that we're working on the security guarantees, Article 5 lies security guarantees, so important. But I want to thank you also that you mentioned the thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted. And as a mother and grandmother, every single child has to go back to its family. This should be one of our main priorities also in these negotiations, to make sure that the children come back to Ukraine, to their families.
Thank you. And we did. I was just thinking we're here for a different reason, but we just a couple of weeks ago made the largest trade deal in history. So that's a big thing, and congratulations. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President, dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday. But now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, at the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
Well, we're going to let the president go over and talk to the president, and we'll see how that works out, and if we can do that. I will say, and again I say it, in the 6 wars that I've settled, I haven't had a ceasefire. We just got into negotiations, and one of the wars was, as you know, in the Congo was 31 years long. Another one that we settled last week with 2 great countries was 35 years going on, and we had no ceasefire. So if we can do the ceasefire, great. And if we don't do a ceasefire, because many other points were given to us, many points were given to us, great points. Please, Georgia, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, Mr. President, for hosting us today in this important meeting. And I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3 years and a half that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed, thanks to you, thanks also to the stalling in the battlefield, which was achieved with the bravery of Ukrainians and with the unity that we all provided to Ukraine. And the reason why I mention it is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So that's why it's a very good day, the one we are in. You can obviously count on Italy as it was from the beginning. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we do absolutely support your efforts towards peace. We will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace. I'm happy that we will discuss about that. I'm happy that we will begin from a proposal, which is the, let's say, Article 5 model, which was Italian at the beginning. So we are always ready to bring our proposals for peace, for dialogue. It's something we have to build together to guarantee peace and to defend the security of our nation. So thank you, Mr. President, for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this meeting and for your commitment. And everything was said, but I just have to say here, everybody around this table is in favor of peace. And we work very hard, and we've worked very hard during the past few years to have a peace which is a robust and long-standing peace. This is why the idea of a trilateral meeting is very important, because this is the only way to fix it. And by the way, I think as a follow-up, we would need probably a quadrilateral meeting, because when we speak about security guarantees, we speak about the whole security of the European continent. And this is why we are all united here with Ukraine on this matter. In order to organize such a trilateral meeting, your idea to ask for a truce or a ceasefire, at least to stop the killings, as we discussed, is a necessity. And we all support this idea. And in order to have such a long-standing peace for Ukraine and for the whole continent, we do need the security guarantees. And the first one is clearly a credible Ukrainian army for the years and decades to come. And the second one is our own commitments, all of us. And we worked very hard during the past few months amongst the coalition of the willings, with the support of NATO, to build the different pillars of security guarantees and our commitments And you can be sure that the Europeans are very lucid about the fact that they have their fair share in these security guarantees for Ukraine, but their own security is clearly at stake in this situation. So you can count on us, as we can count on you, in order to deliver this robust peace for both Ukraine and Europe.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for hosting us here. Can I start where Emmanuel started, which is we all want peace. The war in Ukraine has had a huge impact, particularly on the Ukrainians who've borne the brunt of it, but it's also had an impact on Europe and on the United Kingdom. There's not a family or community that hasn't been affected. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue. I think this is such an important meeting. As a group, I think we've had a discussion on the phone a number of times, Mr. President, but be able now to be around the table to take it forward. And I really feel that we can, I think, with the right approach this afternoon, make real progress, particularly on the security guarantees, and your indication of security guarantees, of some sort of Article 5 style guarantees, fits with what we've been doing with the Coalition of the Willing, which we started some months ago, bringing countries together and showing that we were prepared to step up to the plate when it came to security. With you coming alongside, the US alongside what we've already developed, I think we could take a really important step forward today. A historic step, actually, could come out of this meeting in terms of security for Ukraine and security in Europe. I also feel that we can make real progress towards a just and lasting outcome. Obviously, that has to involve Ukraine, and a trilateral meeting seems the sensible next step. So thank you for being prepared to take that forward, because I think if we can ensure that that is the progress out of this meeting, both security guarantees and some sort of progress on trilateral meeting of some sort to bring some of the difficult issues to a head, then I think today will be seen as a very important day in recent years in relation to a conflict which has gone on for 3 and a bit years, and so far nobody's been able to bring it to this point. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, it's very interesting because this is the first for the White House. You can't say that very often. It's seen a lot over the years, since 1800, 1799, to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words, too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this. And then, of course, moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelensky. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the President of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe. I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too, and we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue. We'll do our best to get it ended. And I believe you have two willing parties, and usually that's good news, but two willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over, and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will. It will save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And, or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best. But I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do, is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair, because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended. And so that's all we ask for, is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, there you had the little roundtable meeting between Zelensky and the European delegation. I'll get into some of my thoughts here in a second. But first and foremost, with the German chancellor just making a fool of himself, okay? I can't get over that. That was the most ridiculous part of the meeting to me, because there's details to be ironed out, but the general consensus is, as you heard from Trump, Zelensky, and everyone else, we're mainly here to discuss security guarantees, whatever that's going to look like. Territory is going to be discussed directly between Putin and Zelensky, and almost all the EU leaders, although and Starmer, by the way, who said some peculiar things, still are sticking to that theme of like, yeah, blah, 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 we want peace. And then out of nowhere, you have, what's his name, Merz, right? The German chancellor out of nowhere just demanding to Trump's face, we need ceasefire! We need ceasefire! And I'm just like, who are you, dude? Who are you to even, you have him, by the way, trying to do it publicly as well, by the way, just like publicly demanding that there be a ceasefire when we've already established and the consensus is reached that's not going to happen. Here you have someone with no leverage, no cards. By the way, the same exact nation that, as we talked about just about an hour before, is the biggest guilty actor in terms of relying on Russian energy and undermining everything that Trump and the U.S. told them not to do in the lead up to this war. Suddenly he comes to the White House and demands a ceasefire. Who is he even, right? You're talking about a nation that gives less of their proportional GDP, forget all overall money in general, less proportionally to the Ukraine effort than the United States is, and he's coming here thinking he can throw his weight around and I know what I'm doing. As if, by the way, okay, the irony is not lost here. The last time that Germany and Russia had a ceasefire, that went so well, didn't it? It just, we didn't have a greater war, and everything was fine. They divided the territory. It all worked out in the end, didn't it, guys? Yeah. So, I don't know who Chancellor Merz thinks he is, but that was pretty hysterical to witness. I was like, why is this idiot talking about ceasefire? Yeah, everyone there, I mean, there's details. We'll talk about the Article 5 thing in a second, because I find that problematic. But everyone's sticking to the same theme, okay? The same theme. And then you have Germany here coming in and being like, no, we want to do it our way. We haven't given anything to the war. By the way, as I'm going to keep on saying, Germany's a big reason this war happened in the first place, because of their reliance on Russian energy. We're going to repeat that theme over and over again. Enabled Putin to be able to do this and not lose too much, because he knew he had leverage. He had a stranglehold on the EU through Germany, through Nord Stream. But Mr. Tough Guy Germany here thinks it should be done my way. Hey, Germany, as I said, last time you guys made a deal with Russia, I don't know if that worked so well. So maybe you ought to do it our way this time, okay? Just saying. Just a point of thought to have there. But, okay. That said, It is what it is on the front of Germany. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So, first and foremost, the first major point that Trump made here was that apparently over the weekend at the Alaska summit, Putin and Russia stated that they would be willing to accept security guarantees, at least that statement, for Ukraine. Now, the issue is going to be in the details, but that's a huge point of progress because, as I said, if the way they're going to get this done is Ukraine has to concede on territory, Russia's going to have to concede on security guarantees, and you seem to hear that being now the theme. However, the issue, as a lot of people in the chat did acutely bring up, and is true, is what are those security guarantees going to look like? I think the consensus thus far, the UK's idea, basically, as if Keir Starmer is a source of great ideas, is that there should be a European peacekeeping force in Ukraine. Because, again, the last time we had one of those in Eastern Europe, it went so... Whatever. Jokes aside, okay? Jokes aside. No. But the issue is, as people are bringing up, is that Starmer and a lot of these people were mentioning the idea of Article 5. Now, what is Article 5? It's basically the NATO statement that says, right, if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. So if someone goes to war with the United States, Germany, UK, everyone else has to come join us. If someone goes to war with Germany, then the US has to come join them. So it's like a mutual defense agreement, right? But obviously, what's certainly off the table and what Russia's not willing to accept is Ukraine's membership in NATO, and I think that's not happening. I mean, obviously it's not happening. But the problem is that, well, will Russia accept something that is not Ukraine being in NATO, but it basically is, right? Because say you attack you attack Ukraine, right? Let's say Russia invades Ukraine again, and then the European peacekeeping force gets involved. And because of that, Article 5, or a different form, but still the same concept of Article 5 is invoked, then how is that substantially different from Ukraine being in NATO? I think that's going to be an issue. I think that's going to be a problem that I don't think Russia necessarily will accept. Frankly, I don't think it's something the U.S. should accept either, right? If Europe wants to do their own defense agreement with Ukraine, fine. But I don't think it should be the case that the U.S. is involved in that, right? By the way, like I said, you don't want American troops and Russian troops obviously fighting each other in Ukraine because human cost aside, that's obviously a catalyst for World War III. So I don't know what exactly that's going to look like. And again, it gets complicated because think about this. So say, formally speaking, America's not involved in Ukraine's defense when it comes to boots on the ground. However, let's say the UK has the peacekeeping troops that they are promising. Russia invades Ukraine again, they're fighting the UK troops. Well, then is that not an invocation of Article 5 of NATO? See where this all gets very complicated. And so it's reasonable for Ukraine to want some security guarantees, but the problem I see as well, again, if Russia's problem is Ukraine being in NATO, are they going to buy the fact that, oh, we're basically doing the same thing but giving it a different name? I don't know. What might be reasonable is a buildup of European Union troops and UK troops on, say, I would say maybe the Polish border and the Romanian border of Ukraine. So that way it's like, look, we don't have NATO troops in Ukraine, but we have NATO troops on the NATO borders, and just know if you attack Ukraine, here's our deterrence. That could work. But in terms of the question of putting European troops on the ground, is that something Russia will accept? Is that something that's even genuinely smart? I have my doubts in that regard, but I guess that's what they're all here to talk about. Now, that said, I think, so that's basically the UK's proposition. The American proposition of having rare earth mineral deals with Ukraine, right? Basically, America has an economic interest in Ukraine instead of a military interest, and that is a point of leverage against Russia, a reason why, we might seek to not want to give that up so willingly. That's probably a lot smarter. That's a lot less provocative. That's very easy to get by. Like, Putin's not going to have a problem with that. The European plan is much more aggressive. Again, will that be accepted? Now, you hear the idea today, they seem to be wanting to drag the U.S. into those security guarantees and peacekeeping. That's obviously not something we should accept. That's not something I think Russia would accept either, okay? Because when it comes to maybe, standing up against, like, probably Russia, the EU's militaries could be seen as weak enough to where they're there for deterrence, they're there for defense, but they can't be brought in offensive capacity. But there's no way on earth Russia accepts American troops in Ukraine. That's not happening. It's not smart that it should happen. That's That's like asking for a Cuban Missile Crisis or something all over again. That's just a stupid idea. But we'll see ultimately what is agreed upon there. Now, that said, you definitely do hear, in terms of Zelensky, as people are noting as well, he sounds a lot more humble, a lot more gracious. He stated himself that of all the times him and Trump have talked, this by far went the best. So it seems like they are getting along for whatever reason that could be. So that's a positive sign. Actually, it's very interesting, right? And now you're seeing the picture. You never once heard Zelensky invoke Article 5. No, the European leaders are there trying to do the dirty work for him, right? The Germany's like, we want ceasefire, we want ceasefire. And then all the other people are talking about this Article 5, right? So I don't know, that'll also be kind of something interesting, right, to be keeping an eye on there. But yeah, that said, there you have it. So apparently now they are going in to discuss what those security guarantees are going to look like. The EU commissioner lady did talk a lot about the prisoner exchange, right? She wants children to come home and all that. That's obviously a good thing. And then the German chancellor right after that chimes in and is like demanding a ceasefire for no reason in front of the public too, by the way. Also notable, territory, right? The discussion of territory is not going to be talked about here, apparently. They want Zelensky and Putin to discuss that with one another. So it's off the table right now. Now, that could be another slip-up. See how complicated this situation is? Because, first of all, right, there's two angles. Now, that said, it's getting closer because if you can get Russia to win on territory, Ukraine to win on security guarantees, then you're more realistically to have a peace deal because they're not fighting for the same thing. But not only does Russia have to accept what the security guarantee plan is for Ukraine, but Ukraine also has to accept what the territory agreement is for Russia. So how is that going to work? I don't exactly know. It's probably going to take a lot of going back and forth. Again, I remain skeptical as to whether Russia will accept the idea of peacekeeping troops right on their border, because I thought that was the whole point why we didn't want the war, right? Or why they wanted the war, according to them. That said, because of the fact that Russia has made those territorial gains, a big reason they went into Ukraine is because their current border is not very well defensible from invasion from, NATO, essentially. So now they probably feel they have a more secure border, so maybe then they'd be easier about the fact that European peacekeeping troops are in Ukraine. Who knows? But still, I don't find it to be something that really necessarily would be all that good, right? All that realistic, I should say, right? You can say to rebuild the Ukrainian military, okay, fine. I don't want to pay for it, but fine. Right? You could say put more NATO troops on the Ukrainian borders in Poland and Romania, who I believe are both already NATO countries, and I'm not sure if Romania is, but okay, fine. But yeah, at the point where you have those peacekeepers in Ukraine, that could be an issue. But that said, I don't know. I guess we'll find out from all of this where it all goes. Who knows? Maybe we have the meeting here in Germany just completely derails the press conference, or the meeting, I should say. And Trump is forced to say to the German chancellor that you don't have the cards. But all right, I guess we'll wrap up the stream here, guys. That seems to be the end of all public comments. So with that said, I guess let me check the live chat for a couple minutes and then we'll end it here. There he says, thank you, Vince. God bless. God bless you too. Representative Dan Crenshaw is back in the chat. Good to see you. The real Dan Crenshaw. Definitely, 100%. A true classic of our live chat here. Trump should be there when they talk. Yeah, I agree. You got to have a mediator, right? Especially when people are fighting, right? You got to have, like when two kids in the school are fighting, they got to go to the principal's office. The principal's got to get them to talk to each other. So I definitely agree that you should have the mediator there. And, it gives some leverage, I guess, to Ukraine. So BMax says, excellent points, Vince, on the Article 5 NATO. That's what I've been wondering about on this current summit. It seems that, if not the main contention by Putin. Well, that's why it's interesting. So Putin, again, said in Alaska, he agrees with some security guarantees for Ukraine. But what the EU is asking for is like Article 5 style security guarantees, which is, again, Putin's not his only reason he started the war, but one of his major contentions, right? One of the major grievances why Russia justified their invasion of Ukraine. I don't think Putin would accept that, and frankly, I don't see why he would. And then I don't even think America should accept that because, okay, if the EU wants to do peacekeeping for Ukraine, fine. But then what happens, like I said, if UK troops and Russian troops are shooting at each other, does that not already still invoke Article 5 of NATO? It doesn't really make sense to me. So I'm not sure. Not sure. So let's see, guys. Feel free to super chat the show in the final minutes here if you got any thoughts, comments, or just want to send your support. I would say keep the EU out of it. Most of all their words were nothing but snobbish. I totally agree. You know, you want to have the NATO guy there, fine. You want to have the EU commissioner, fine. What was the point of having the German chancellor there, you know? He hasn't contributed anything to the war, only 0.4% of his GDP, less than the United States, even though they're a smaller country and they claim to care so much about this, buying Russian oil. Why is he there? You know, the guy from Finland probably has the biggest reason to be there because he has a border with Russia, okay? Germany just likes to complain, you know? I don't know if they have the best track record on peace. Like, what is the point of having him there? I don't really know. Let's see. Like the stream, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Trump warned Germany about that, relying on Russia. Yeah. Well, he did a whole hour talking about that on the stream, but now he's going to come and demand that it be done his way. Okay? Sorry for all the World War II jokes, but I think they're pretty applicable. Okay? You cannot trust Germany and Russia to mediate peace on anything, you know? So this is another trilateral agreement that is above and beyond the reach of Congress because there's more than 2 parties in the agreement, making each party to be responsible for supporting each other. I mean, I think it's kind of been generally accepted in the past several decades that when it comes to foreign negotiations, actually, I think there's a law in the 60s that enabled this. It's the one Trump's currently using to do the tariffs. That they gave a lot more executive power to the president when it comes to negotiating this stuff. So Congress would have to ratify, yeah, but it's not a treaty of war involving the United States. The United States is just mediating. So I'm not sure to what degree that involves the requirement of congressional approval. Let's see here. What else we got going on? Russia agreed to Article 5. Well, that's interesting, right? That's certainly if that's true what they agreed to, then that's really interesting. Because again, that they claim that's their whole reason for starting the war, so it would be interesting to go back on that. Now that said, I mean realistically, it's not the only reason they started. I think it's something they used as a pretext, as a justification. But maybe the Russian angle is, well, now we have the territory that we wanted. Their land border with Europe is much more defensible, so now we're fine with Article 5? I don't know. Or, you know, genuinely, they're done taking territory. They're fine with what they have. It'd be interesting to see. I don't know. All right, well, with that said, guys, I think we're basically wrapped up here. Shout out Jessica Price. Thank you very much. Okay, that said, guys, all right, we'll wrap it up. Be sure to leave a like on the stream before we go. All right, if you're brand new to the channel, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure your notifications are on, by the way, because sometimes YouTube does not recommend the content. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We'll be live here again, probably sometime this week. I'm trying to start a streaming schedule, maybe like twice a week. The problem is that, well, the fine folks at the furniture store still have not delivered my actual desk. So they're supposed to be delivering it in the middle of when I was going to stream tomorrow. So I don't know. Thank you very much, illegals, for you know, your great essential labor that we need in this country. Right? That's a joke. That's a joke. But all right, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Until next time, God bless. See you guys later. Peace. Take care, everybody.